Welcome to another BTL Exclusive, where we're going to talk about the upcoming college basketball season right here on the Bookit Sports Podcast Network. Before we dive in, Jovan, appreciate you joining me here. Excited to talk about some college basketball with you, but we got to let our listeners know. Drop a follow on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed, have your notice turned on, and make sure you're following us on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you're getting your podcasts. There are many more pods to come for the college basketball season, NFL, college football. I got a feeling we're going to be dropping some pods once we get close to playoff time there and also March Madness time. But for now, let me slow my roll here for a second. We've got the college basketball season to talk about here, Jovan, and I am stoked to get into it, my man. We've got only a couple days. The season starts up on Monday here. We're recording this on Wednesday. Only a couple days left, man. How excited are you for college basketball?
So excited, dude. It's been way too long since I've been able to start bitching about Mississippi Valley State games and late game free throws and 40-point spreads. So excited to get right back into it.
I'm excited to hear who your McNeese State is for this season, right? You were all over McNeese last year, and hey, maybe it's McNeese again for this upcoming season under Will Wade. Who knows? Excited to hear about it. But you've had some pretty good calls on some of these mid-major teams. And here's what we're going to do, guys. To all the people listening, give you a quick breakdown here. We'll go over some changes in the college basketball landscape briefly, and then we're going to dive in. Me and Jovan are both going to talk about some hot takes or season predictions we've got for you guys. Then we're going to go over a couple mid-major takes, favorite teams, sleepers, and frauds, and then we're going to dive into the Power 5 conferences, spend a little bit more time on those, diving into who we think wins those puppies, sleepers, frauds, conference winners, you name it, we're talking about it. And then, of course, we'll close this puppy out with who we think wins the Natty. All right, but why don't we go ahead and get it started off? I'll give the people some nugs about this upcoming college basketball season. Look, much like college football, Jovan, the CBB landscape, it's going to look a lot different in 2024, plain and simple. You got Coach Cal moving, to a rival team right now from Kentucky to Arkansas. That's going to be crazy to see play out. We're going to talk about it. I'm excited to see Mark Pope taking over, former Kentucky star, won a natty for them years ago, taking back over that program at Kentucky. It's going to be a battle all season, Kentucky and Arkansas. Who's going to be better? Both teams are still pretty loaded. Excited to see how that plays out. And then while that's going on, we've got, college basketball coaches right now turning down NBA jobs, supposedly, right? Turning down an opportunity to work with LeBron James to stay at the program that you're building up in college basketball. And hey, maybe NIL has something to do with it. Maybe the ease of recruiting at some of these big schools makes that decision a little bit easier. But it's pretty crazy time we're in right now where a coach will stay at, not even the biggest name college basketball school, but one of them for sure, instead of going to the NBA to work with LeBron. Maybe that tells you where this sport is right now. I mean, money is involved, and it's only going to change more. Enjoy it while you can, guys, and let's just hope they don't change that March Madness tourney. Okay, and then on the other side of it, we've got guys like Tony Bennett, legends of the game, some of the greatest coaches stepping down saying, you know what, this isn't for me. NIL, I'm out. Transfer portal, no thanks. I like to homegrow my guys. I don't want to deal with all this shit. We got coaches, legendary Hall of Fame coaches, Tony Bennett retiring a week before the season. This is crazy. Saying enough is enough. I'm done. I'm out. It's a crazy time in college basketball. It's a crazy time in college sports. And just like football, it's going to be madness in college basketball as well. I'm excited to talk about it. We're in for a crazy season coming up. Crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be insane.
Jovan, you want to go over some of our predictions for this season or hot takes? You want to start us off?
Why not? Talk about some hot takes.
Sure.
You're asking who my McNeese State of this year is? It's still McNeese. So okay. I am circling back, and really, I didn't put a label on it before the season. I guess I said it, they would go to the tourney. I thought they would win a game, obviously. This year, I am putting it in writing. I'm putting it in clip form, whatever this is. McNeese State will return to the tournament, which is not a hot take, but this time, I don't care who they play, they'll be making it to the round of 32. They're winning a game. Will Wade's back with a stronger team this year by a wide margin, which is crazy to think about, but they'll be back and they'll be dancing for more than one game.
Well, doesn't matter who they play, what the matchup is, or how that team is at that point. Jovan, you're taking them to win. And you know what? At this point, they probably deserve that respect. That's a program Will Wade's building down there. They've got some guys.
Have you seen that roster, Krabs? Because
they've got some guys.
It's more than just some guys. Like they lose Shahada Wells, which was like the head of the snake, and still somehow that team is 20 times better. Like Sincere Barker, who I'm sure you're familiar with, is probably going to be ahead of the snake now. Like they have Brandon Murray from Ole Miss, like Quadir Copeland. Like they still bring back all of their big men. Like they still have Shumate. They brought in Celebangu from Arizona State. Like they can do whatever they want, that roster. That's like, obviously they're like arm and a leg better than everybody in the Southland, but that's like a legitimate team mid-major wise that can beat anybody. So like they see Alabama in Tuscaloosa early in the non-con season. That's going to be a game. Not going to say they're going to win that game, but they might win that game.
Well, that's crazy. But you know what? That's a perfect segue here, Jovan, into my first hot take here. Speaking of Bama, a lot of hype around the Tide, right? A lot of people talking about this team, talking about this program, as they should. There's a lot of expectations right now. You got guys like Mark Sears, Grant Nelson coming back, Nate Oates taking this team to the Final Four for the first time in program history. I thought Alabama was a football school. I'm confused. Now they're a basketball powerhouse too? Okay, that seems fair. But here's my hot take. All right, Alabama, who has one of, if not the best roster in college basketball for this upcoming season. Alabama, after making their first Final Four in program history last year. Alabama, this team is a wagon, a team that everybody loves, will struggle at times this season, and they will not look like the best team in the SEC. And as weak of a take that might sound, I mean, they're favorites to win the SEC. They're getting hyped, slurped like no other. And as they probably should after the run they made last year, they return a lot of their stars, and they add some other guys as well. They have the second best recruiting class in the country. They bring in Big Cliff from Rutgers, so now they have a big man presence down there in the paint. He's a stud. But somehow, some way, this Alabama team is going to find a way to fall short, because just like we saw with Miami a couple years ago when they bought their entire team, found a way to fall short. All right, and this Alabama team, after they made their run last year, they had their fun. All right, they did their thing. They went to the Final Four. They had a miraculous run. History. Okay, but Alabama, somehow, some way this season, with this loaded roster, Jovan, is going to find a way to fall short. They're not going to win the SEC. They're not going to win the SEC. Okay, look, Alabama, it looks like on paper they should dominate the SEC this year. It's a down year. Auburn can't score this season. Tennessee loses Dalton Connect. Coach Cal's going to fucking Arkansas. What's going on? It looks like the weirdest year in the SEC of all time. Alabama should be a shoo-in to win this conference. Well, that's not how college basketball works. Somebody's going to upset them. Somebody's going to be better. And they might be really good. They're going to make the tournament. Don't get me wrong. They're going to be ranked. Don't get me wrong. But they will not make a run like they did last year, and they won't have that magic they had last season. Alabama will be a shell of themselves compared to last season.
I'm in on that. I don't think they're going to be like clear-cut title contenders, like straight off from the jump. Granted, they have a pretty tough schedule to open the season, but I think they'll struggle for a little bit. I'm in on that. I definitely see myself fading them in quite a few games, both in SEC play and maybe some of these bigger games not named McNeese start the season.
Oh, yeah. 100%. You got one more take for us before we dive into the mid-majors?
Yeah, I got one more, which shouldn't be as hot a take, but this is a generational player, I guess we're talking about here. The best freshman in the country, I don't think it's Cooper Flagg this season. I think it's VJ Edgecombe. And I think he is going to be an absolute disaster for teams in the Big 12. I think he's going to have one of the better seasons we've seen out of really a freshman. I know Baylor's had plenty of talented freshmen in the past couple of years, but this feels like the one. And I'm saying that as someone who very actively wants to see Baylor fail on every level, every sport. But he is going to be ridiculous this season. I think he is going to end up being the number one pick this year, not Cooper Flagg. And he's going to have a scary season.
Wouldn't that be something? After all the hype, and look, I know you're not saying Cooper Flagg is going to suck. Okay, he's going to be good. Don't get me wrong. And you know what? As a Wizards fan, I kind of hope we get him as of right now.
Duke team is also deep enough to the point where I don't think he's going to have like a Zion type season at Duke. Like I feel like he can fit in and play his role and still be one of the best talents we've seen in the last couple of years. But VJ Edgecombe, I think, is different.
Wow. Cooper Flagg will not be the best freshman in the country after all the hype this offseason. That sounds like a hot take. We'll see how it plays out. You know I can get behind it.
Yeah.
See how it plays out. All right. I got one more for you. This one, not really a homer pick, I guess kind of, almost in the DMV. VCU will be a ranked team 1 month into the season when they're undefeated still. VCU, the Rams. Look, guys, it's been a while, right? But let's not forget the magic in that program. VCU, the Rams. They will be ranked. They will be undefeated 1 month into the season. That's actually a crazy take, by the way. Look, I know they have some layups. They have some cake games early on this season. Let me go ahead and go over their first couple games, of the first month of the season here. Bellarmine, Boston College, Merrimack, Loyola, Maryland, Seton Hall, Elizabeth City State. Okay, the majority of those teams stink. Let's not kid ourselves there. But
Elizabeth City State Krabs?
Never even heard of that school. Never even heard of that school. Bless their hearts. They're going to have a tough night that night. But there are 2 real schools in that list, okay? Boston College and Seton Hall. Those aren't, no slouches. They're not great, but they're no slouches. I think VCU beats both of them. I think they stay undefeated in a team that, in my opinion, did not get the respect they deserve in the AP poll, the preseason poll, not getting votes, not getting respect, not getting looks. I think this VCU team shows up and shows out this season. I do. I think they go undefeated early. I think they get ranked, and maybe they even hold this. Maybe they even hold that ranking all season. Who knows? That'd be crazy. But let's not forget how good of a coach Ryan Odom is. Okay, we've forgotten about it. Let me go ahead and remind you and jog your memory. UMBC over UVA a couple years ago. That was Ryan Odom. Absolute offensive mastermind. This guy is going to change this VCU program. Last year, it took him a little while to get going. I'm telling you, trust the process. The Rams will be back. Okay, and VCU has been relatively dormant of late, all right, compared to, 5-10 years ago when they were making Final Four runs. Crazy, right? But this is a program that's etched in the history of the sport, and they're not done yet. They have a great basketball program, great arena. They got boosters. They care. And you know what they did this all season, Jovan? Just when their star Max Shulga was about to go to Villanova, not too far away. You know what they did? The boosters rounded up. They said, we'll give you those coins, my man. You better fucking ball out this year, though.
I don't know how they pulled that off.
I'll tell you how they pulled it off. They paid him the same money. They matched it. They price match guaranteed it. And he said, you know what, guys? I respect the fuck out of that. I'll stay here for that same price. And I'll win you guys the A10. And that's exactly what Max Shulga, who, by the way, is one of the best players in the country. You don't know that kid yet. Watch his highlights. Not only him is returning to VCU, Jovan, they got 6 key players returning from last year's team that was pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
Watch out for the VCU Rams. They will be undefeated a month into the season. They're going to beat Boston College. They're going to beat Seton Hall. They're going to beat Elizabeth City State. And they're going to be ranked. Watch out for the Rams this season, especially early on.
I'm in on that. I see the vision. Vision for sure.
Good. All right. Awesome. Well, hey, we could talk hot takes and talk about, VCUs and, mid-majors and all these teams all fucking day and hot takes and stuff. But let's dive in and actually talk about these mid-major conferences and teams we really think have a chance to maybe pull off some magic, later on in March. Maybe teams that we're not as high on that people are absolutely slurping, like St. Louis or like Grand Canyon, who had a great run last year. Let's talk about some of these mid-major teams that are popular, that are trendy, and some that might not be, and let the people know where our heads are at with these mid-majors. Jovan, why don't you get us started off? Tell us your favorite mid-major team for this upcoming season.
It's McNeese. It's McNeese Krabs.
Run it back.
I won't beat it to a pulse because we already talked about it earlier. But the problem with them last year, first of all, it was a team who hasn't been there before, a program who hasn't been there before. They had a fantastic season, but they ran into a buzzsaw in Gonzaga. That was one of the craziest shooting performances I've ever seen. So I don't want to fault them too much for that. But another issue that I kind of saw with them going into the season, they were pretty small. So a lot of their bigs last year, including like Shoemate, who's really a true 4, and they played him there. They're athletic, like they can play on the break. That's kind of what they do. But they kind of got beat up on the inside against any team that can do it. Now they welcome in really 3 different guys that are going to play a true big. You get some size on the perimeter too with guys like Quadir Copeland, who, he's 6'6". He's probably going to play the 3 next to Shoemate. They're just so much better of a well-rounded team. So yes, obviously they're going to blow past everybody in the Southland, but in non-con, they've got some bigger tests, not just Alabama. There's a couple great games in there, and I feel like they're better suited for a game in March than they were last year. So that's the reason why I'm running it back, outside of the fact that Will Wade's building an actual program, and the talent level, comparatively, is just so much surpassing everybody else.
Could not agree more. And I have 0 counters. I have 0 qualms. McNeese is 100% a wagon. And run it back once again, Will Wade. He's built a program down there, and he's not done. Love it. Absolutely love it. Can I give you my favorite team?
Let me hear it.
That'd be awesome. How about the Bradley Braves?
Ooh.
You've heard me talk about the Bradley Braves a good amount over the years. I've been high on this team for a while. Yes. Blue collar. They got depth, hard workers. They typically don't have goats, but they work together. They play a lot of guys. They're a great team. They got a really good coach as well. Brian Wardle. Remember the name. Brian Wardle. He's entering his 10th season with the Bradley Braves. And I think he's got his best roster yet. Let's not let this team, get swept. They've had 5 20-plus win seasons in the last 7 years. Nobody cares. Nobody talks about it because they don't get to the finish line. They don't win the conference championship. They don't always get into the tournaments. They kind of fall short, typically more often than not. But I'm trying to work backwards a little bit, looking at some of these mid-major teams. And I'm asking myself, which of these teams has this year's Jack Golke? Which of these teams has the kid on their squads who is ridiculously talented, but also has that magic, that mojo, and just feels like you've already seen him drop 25 or 30 points in March Madness out of fucking nowhere, right? I feel like that's a smart way to maybe pick your favorite mid-major, a team that maybe shocked the world. And this year for me, it's the Bradley Braves. And if you haven't heard this kid's name, you're going to hear it a lot this upcoming season in Duke Dean. Duke Dean, one of the best mid-major players in college basketball. Duke Dean is 5'9" on a fucking step stool. They say he's 5'8" in the reports. I'd like to get a tape measure out. This kid, he's not big. He doesn't have the size, but he's got the heart. And the kid can fucking make baskets, that's for sure. He's a stud. Point guard, absolute beast, runs the floor for this Bradley Braves team, and he will be this year's Jack Golke. I'm telling you right now, Duke Dean, remember the name, 5'8" stud. This kid's a beast. Wow. He could do it all. He runs the point. And let's not forget, this team also returns Darius Hannah. They return Christian Davis, Zeke Montgomery, who went to Rhode Island last year after leaving Bradley, who was a glue guy for them, thought he could do better. Nope, didn't like it there, came back home to Bradley. Coach said, come on home, buddy. We need you. That could be the missing piece right there. Zeke Montgomery returning back. And then you look at the rest of the conference, Jovan. The 2 best coaches, the 2 best teams, they're dead. They're done. Indiana State and Drake, but their head coaches are gone. What's the competition in the MVC? Nothing for the Bradley Braves. Nothing for Brian Wardle. If he can't do it this year in year 10, he can never do it. I'm all in on the Bradley Braves. I'm all in on Duke Dean. Remember the name.
I like that. I like that from you, Krabs. This could be the year they finally get over the hump a little bit. Start stacking some wins.
He's a stud. I'm telling you, this is the year. Look, Bradley's always stacking 20-plus wins. They're doing their job. But this is the year they finally break through.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite sleeper team? Because I know we talked about McNeese. We talked about Bradley. I know those aren't, it's not Duke and UNC, but these are 2 mid-major teams that are kind of solid. At least they have been in years past. Can we talk about some sleepers that we like for this season?
Yeah, and I'll give you a boring answer because I think this more pertains to the regular season and betting them more so than them actually making national noise outside of maybe going to the first 4 or something like that. I like Merrimack this year, and they're going from the NEC to the MAAC, the MAC with 2 A's. And when I look at that conference, not the same as I've been true about the NEC, but every time I bet that conference, it's like which defense is going to out-scheme the other, because none of the offenses in that conference are really that good. We know that. But it's always rock fights. And what is Merrimack built for? Rock fights, because they run a defense that's, always really good year in, year out, but it's also a system that nobody can really figure out on a year-to-year basis. That's why we were getting into the dog days of, March and late February last year, and like Merrimack started to make a run, and Wagner, same thing, even though they're relatively shorthanded. They're just 2 gritty defenses that gave a lot of people trouble. Now you're going to the MAC with 2 A's. That's kind of exactly where you want to live. So, they're returning some guards, returning a lot of production. They've got veterans to kind of lead that defense and that team. That's a team I think I'm going to have my coins on quite a bit come end of conference play, especially. So I think they can make some noise and win us some coin.
Well, only legendary programs make the move from the NEC to the MAC. It's not easy making that jump.
Not easy. It's a trek.
I can tell you one team right now that's done that recently, Mount St. Mary's.
The Goats.
I had to mention them after you talk about that move. Come on.
Figured they were coming.
Kind of disrespectful you didn't mention them, but I had to. I had to fill in the cracks there to all the listeners, okay? Don't let the Mount get hot. All jokes aside, though, the Mount is not a mid-major team to look out for this year. They're not.
Oh, they're going to be bad.
Bless their hearts. They're going to be bad. Yep. All right. Your favorite sleeper, Merrimack. And that is absolute piss to my ears because I just talked about how VCU is going to go undefeated and they play Merrimack in their third game of the season. So we'll see how that goes.
It's probably not one they're going to win at VCU. I'll say that.
Well, after hearing you talk about them, they might cover.
They might cover. I think they'll be, because, looking at their non-conference, they do play a couple of interesting games in a row. because like they go to VCU. I believe they host. I don't know if they host or if it's neutral court, but they host Princeton. Then they go to Rutgers and to Butler. I feel like there's going to be a significant scare in there for some of these teams. One of those teams.
Maybe they'll shock Princeton and knock off another mid-major that's very, very popular and trendy for this upcoming season.
That could be it.
All right, watch out for Merrimack this offseason. I got a favorite sleeper. It's not Merrimack. It might be grosser, if that's possible.
Ooh.
Arkansas State. The Red Wolves.
Good God.
Don't let the Red Wolves get hot. It might be too late. You remember how good this team finished the season last year? You probably don't because you're remembering other more important things, right? But let's not forget how good this team did at the end of the season last year. They started out terrible. Okay, but they heated up the last 2 months. They made a run. They won like all but 3 of their last like 15 or 16 games of the season. They closed out strong. I think it was 12 out of 16 of their last games they won. And they returned 5 of their top 7 scorers. I'll tell you what, Jovan. I mean, they made a run to the Sun Belt title game last year after a horrid start to the season. They couldn't buy a win. And I was high on this team last year. I liked their coach. It was a rough start last year, and this team hasn't made a tourney since 1999. I'll go ahead and get all the bad things out now. But Here's some good things about the Red Wolves, all right? They added Kobe Julian, who I think is one of the best players, if not the best player in the Sun Belt for this upcoming season, the transfer from Louisiana. Don't let him get hot. It might be too late. They get Joseph Pinion coming in from Arkansas, big name guy. Rashad Marshall coming over from Ole Miss, not as big of a name guy, but he's played some good minutes on a pretty solid Ole Miss squad. This team has bodies. And you look at the rest of the Sun Belt, they got worse. Give me Arkansas State. Give me the Red Wolves. Talk about due. They haven't made it to the March Madness since 1999. Give me a break. I think this year they win the conference behind Kobe Julian, who's going to be one of the best mid-major players in the country. And they finally go dancing. Arkansas State. Don't say I didn't tell you.
I could very much get down with that. It's a confusing conference, like the Sun Belt is. So I feel like that's a pretty good conference to pick a sleeper out of. Like I really couldn't tell you what James Madison and App State are going to be this year, and they were the class of the conference last year. And right behind them, you had Troy and Arkansas State, which Troy, again, another pretty confusing team that you always know is going to be up there and hanging with a lot of teams. They can score, they can play defense, but Arkansas State, I don't know. That's one that I could certainly get down with. I like that.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and reword that for you. That's sharp.
Okay, that's sharp as ma.
Yeah, good. And by the way, JMU, although I do think they will be good once again, and their sports teams, I don't know how they do it. They must be feeding those kids money under the table. Why are they going to JMU? They'll be good once again. They just beat VT by 20 in a sneak scrimmage. Not that VT's good this year, but I mean, that's still a pretty impressive win. Come on. Smack them.
It is.
Smack them. Jeez. All right. Well, we talked about our favorite sleepers. Can we talk about our favorite frauds in the mid-major conferences? Who's a team that's getting talked about a lot right now who you are not as high on?
I think we have a collab fraud, Krabs, because we both have St. Louis marked down here, who might be one of the sneakiest, trendy teams. I guess not sneaky anymore, but trendiest teams of the offseason because Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the highlight coming over to them, along with, that whole coaching staff pretty much and a couple of the other players as well. It looks good on paper. I just think with how good I'm expecting some of the other teams, like you already mentioned, at VCU, and like I think Dayton's going to even take a step up this year, even though they lost some guys to the NBA.
They'll be good.
They'll be good. There's a lot of good teams. I just don't see them taking the step up that it seems like everybody's already giving them the grace of in the A10.
And I would love to add on to this a little bit as well. And there are some other good teams in the A10. I'm an A10 guy.
A lot of good teams.
Love the A10. You got VCU, Dayton, St. Joe's is going to be really good this year. George Mason has a really good young coach. They'll be solid again this season.
St. Joe's. I was interested in them. Well, just quickly, because I don't want to put stock into secret scrimmages too much, but I've been secretly keeping track of what they've done, and it's like they beat the shit out of Providence, which I thought was really interesting. So they've looked good all the way through. They're a team that I would probably keep my eye on too, but you're right. There's a lot of good teams in the A10, so to expect St. Louis to just march in there and roll, I think is crazy.
I think people are jumping the gun a little bit with St. Louis. Will Indiana State's coach and Robbie Avila, who you called, I think, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, coming over, will that make a huge difference? Yes, it's going to be night and day. Absolute night and day for St. Louis in this program that's been down in the dumps for damn near a decade. Absolute joke. Sure. 100%. But is it going to happen overnight? No. You know how hard it is to rebuild a program at this level as well? It's fucking rocket science. It's hard. That's why nobody ever really does it or accomplishes it. That's why when you see it happen, you're like, holy shit, that's a great coach. And you know what? I do think, the mojo change, bringing over Indiana State squad and Robbie, they will be improved. But will this team be a ranked squad like everybody's acting? Does this team deserve to be getting votes in the AP poll? Give me a break. There's one reason why this team's receiving votes in the AP poll, and that's because Robbie Avila is transferring over there. Is he going to be able to do it all on his own? Probably not in a very, very scrappy conference. I need to see it, man. And I think St. Louis will be in a much better spot this season and going forward for sure. I do like that coach from Indiana State. I like the program he's building over there. But it's not going to happen overnight, and they are not going to be the sleeper team that people are expecting for this upcoming season. There's no way.
Yeah. And I feel like as much as we talk about everybody that went to St. Louis, I think a lot of people are forgetting, and I'm not just bringing this up because it's McNeese, but Sincere Parker is with Will Wade. I would have felt a lot more confident talking about St. Louis being this amazing team, transformative team. Granted, like, not that they were shit last year, years prior, but I would have been a lot higher on them had the heart and soul of that team not been in Lake Charles this year, which I think is huge.
Yeah. I mean, you can't even get him to stay. He's going to fucking McNeese, respectfully.
Will Wade.
I know it's Will Wade. Don't get me wrong.
I know. He's doing something. He's busting out the seams out there, dude.
Yeah, he's making promises he probably shouldn't be, and he's paying people too much money, probably.
Hey, whatever you got to do. Whatever you got to do. That has a chance to be like one of the coolest stories. I mean, not that
yeah.
Will Wade's the greatest person of all time, but that would be super cool if he just went to McNeese and built an actual program. I don't know how long he's going to be there, but super cool.
I don't think any of us expected him to still be there right now.
No.
And I'm sure he's had plenty of calls, plenty of offers. So good for him for standing on business and continuing to build that thing down there.
Yeah. I'm hoping he stays long enough to eventually unseat Jamie Dixon.
Huh. That'd be something.
Yeah.
Although
I feel like
we might need a new coach.
Jamie's probably on his last legs here soon. As much as I hate to say it, he's a great dude, but
I'm going to need the TC report once we get there.
Yeah.
And I think we're done with our mid-major talk here. I think we can maybe move into some of these power conferences. Let's get to it. I'm down. And let's start with the best one yet, the ACC. You hate the ACC. I can see it in your face. You hate it.
You'll probably be, I don't know if you'll be surprised, but you'll be happy to learn I love the ACC this year.
Wow.
I feel this year, because there's a couple teams, I feel like the middle is clustered with teams that I like. Usually the Big 12 is so good. I don't just bet the Big 12 a lot because I like the Big 12 or I know the Big 12. I bet the Big 12 because anybody can beat anybody. So when you catch teams in the right spot, there's talent everywhere. So when you get the Cincinnati at home against Kansas, that Cincy's good this year. So probably a bad example, but happened last year. And those games are going to happen a lot. And there's a couple teams that we'll talk about that I really, really like in the ACC. So I'll be betting them.
Let me set the scene a little bit here in the ACC, and then I want to hear about your sleeper, your frauds, and your conference winner. All right. But first, let me set the scene here. Look, it's all Duke and UNC. All the talk, all the hype for this upcoming season. It's all Duke and all UNC, and deservingly so. And look, it is every year. Okay. We know that's how it goes in the ACC. Unfortunately for me as an ACC guy, my ears are still bleeding from all the Duke and UNC slurpage just from decades, right? That's just how it fucking goes. It's baked in. And the ACC low-key has fallen off overall as a conference. People chirp it. They say the teams aren't good. They say it's fallen off. They say it's not, as good as where it used to be. But, when it comes down to tournament time, NCAA tourney or even like the ACC tourney always ends up being fucking crazy. These guys show up. These teams show up. And I swear to God, there's always one or two or three handful of teams making runs in the NCAA tournament from the ACC that you wouldn't expect. For example, NC State last year. Give me a break. It's just what the ACC does. They might not perform the best during the regular season when people are, not as tapped in, but when the lights are bright, they show up. Okay. But, me personally, I'm not as high on Duke and UNC this upcoming season as some are. I got a couple sleeper teams that I'm looking at and also some teams that I think might be frauds in this conference. I'm excited to talk about it as a VT alum. I'm pretty tapped into the ACC, and I'm really excited to hear what you're thinking about this conference this upcoming season. Jovan, we're going to try to find the NC State in the ACC this year. But first, you know what? I'll go ahead and pass the baton over to you. Let's hear about your sleeper that you like in this conference. Who is the NC State for 2024?
I got two options for you, Krabs. I really like Notre Dame this year. I've been targeting them. We've been talking about them since the way they finished the season last year. I mean, really strong. They're a super young team. I mean, they were at that point. They still are now, but got a lot more experience under their belt. The way they started playing at the end of last year seemed like the guys started getting comfortable, started gelling. Marcus Burton is an absolute superstar. I mean, really everybody in that system seemed to get a little more comfortable, and they made some ads like Mataloco, who's a really good guard coming from Princeton, who's also giving them some experience there. So, like, I feel like that team is not only older, but so much more well-rounded kind of around Marcus Burton this year that they're going to be a really fun team to watch. I think they give me vibes of what I thought Wake was last year, which was the pesky team that eventually they did end up missing the tournament, but they were damn close and on the bubble. And truth be told, without a couple of really flat performances at the end of the season, probably should have been in the tournament. So Notre Dame won, and I also think I was a year early on Wake. And I'm really shocked that all of those guys came back to that team, like Hunter Salas, and Efton Reed is a crazy one too that I think is only going to get better. Like, they did lose Andrew Carr, but again, another team super well-rounded. I think they're going to pull quite a few upsets this year. So those two, I think, have NC State potential. I think the ceiling is probably a little higher for Wake than Notre Dame, but I think they're equally going to be as fun in the regular season.
Yeah. I mean, the Wake one makes more sense, but in the ACC, you probably don't want to pick the one that makes the most sense, to be honest with you. Maybe it is the Irish. I like what Shrewsbury's building out there. I think Burton's a stud, underrated point guards. I'm low-key a closet Notre Dame fan, grew up a Notre Dame fan, so I'm always keeping tabs, keeping eyes over there, and I like what they're building out there in South Bend. I was a Mike Bray guy, a little bit worried about Shrewsbury coming in, changing the scene, but he's impressed me. That's for sure. I think Notre Dame is a sleeper. I don't think they're getting respect at all in the odds to win this conference, which is a little bit concerning, but a lot of better teams out there on paper too. So
yeah,
I think they'll be really good.
They won't win the conference. They won't be close. But
who knows? Maybe they pull off some magic in the ACC tourney. Maybe they get hot late. Who knows?
Yeah.
I got another crazy team. Louisville.
Ooh.
When's the last time Louisville's done something? It's been a while.
It's been a bit, Krabs.
It's been a while. It's actually crazy how bad Kenny Payne did.
Yeah.
As the head coach at Louisville. It's sad. I think that was his alma mater. He blew it. I mean, he set them back. You didn't think it could get worse after the Rick Pitino shit? Oh, it did. Oh, it did. It got worse. This Louisville team, I mean, it can't get worse. They're in the basement. It's time to rebuild. And they couldn't have picked a better head coach to come in this season than Pat Kelsey, the little bald spark. They could not have picked a better coach to come in and take over this program than Pat Kelsey, the little bald spark plug coming over from College of Charleston. This guy means business. Don't be fooled by his height. He's got more heart than any other coach in the ACC combined. This guy is going to turn around this Louisville program, and he might not bring them back to a title in year one, but he's going to bring them out of the fucking ground into a relevant program in year one. And I'll tell you what, it won't all be Pat Kelsey, but he's brought in some really good players in the portal. I've been very impressed already what he's been able to do at a Louisville program that has the big name, but it cannot be easy to recruit there right now. Come on, after what's been going on, cannot be easy. Pat Kelsey, he brings over his best players from Charleston. He brings over one of the best three-point shooters I've ever seen in my life, Rain Smith. You haven't seen that kid shoot? Oh, you will this year. He's fucking nice. When that kid's hot, he's the best shooter I've ever seen in my life from three. He's incredible. He's Australian. He's a bucket. Rain Smith is going to be an issue for Louisville this season. But, Jovan, that's not even the best piece they bring over. They get Fat Edwards coming over from JMU, who was one of the best players in the country last year. Legitimately. He's got size. He's got talent. He's got NBA builds. This kid is a rock star. He's going to be the best player on this team. But wait, there's more. You ever heard of Chucky Hepburn, who kind of fell off a little bit? He's got something to prove, and he's got a new team, and he's motivated under Pat Kelsey to prove the rest of the world wrong that he is a good ball player. Okay, people forgot about Chucky. I haven't. This team is going to be good right off the rip. They might not win the ACC, but they're going to shock some people. They're going to turn some heads.
Yeah, I mean, that roster is extremely talented. If they can put it together, which maybe it takes them a little bit to do so, I don't see how they don't compete. I know they're as a program kind of working themselves back up from, I don't know how I could get to a lower bottom or a lower floor, but they got to do something. I'm interested to see what they do with Kashawn Pryor. because I think he's sneakily, I've been on him since a lot of last year. His attitude kind of got him in the way of being super successful at USF, but he is one of the sneakily most skilled big men, I think, in college basketball.
I'll tell you what, you put that kid in Pat Kelsey's program, no funny business, all team, 24/7. I think that kid's attitude problem might just disappear, right?
Not only that, but I think playing. I don't know how the rotations are going to work yet because I haven't put eyes on Louisville and
he plays everyone.
I know.
Kelsey
and I'm
plays
saying
everyone.
If he plays with Ali Khalifa on the floor at the same time, that is a match made in heaven, Krabs. Because you're getting
I not bring up
you didn't bring up
Khalifa step, bro?
You didn't bring up.
How did I not bring him up?
I think
they've got bodies.
Go. They've got a lot of bodies.
They've got Nikola Jokic in college basketball form, way worse. Don't get me wrong, in every capacity, but he does the same shit. I'm telling you guys, they have talent down there. Look at what Pat Kelsey was able to do at an irrelevant program at College of Charleston, built them up from the ground, and they were irrelevant. They were terrible, one of the worst teams in college basketball in D1, and he turned them around in a couple years. They were a wagon over the last couple seasons. They were great, and he plays all his guys. And he's a great coach, and he's a great dude, and he's going to change that program from being scumbags down there in Louisville to being good dudes, and they're going to get rewarded for it. I'm telling you. Great coach, great guy. Watch out for Louisville this year.
I'm in on that.
What about frauds? We're talking too much about some, fun teams, good things. Let's talk about some frauds. Let's beat some teams down a little bit here. We're being a little too nice. Who's your fraud?
Way too
Who's your fraud in the ACC this year, Jovan?
I'm going to go with Syracuse. And not a fraud in the sense that everybody expects them to be top of the conference or like a national contender, but everybody just kind of expects Syracuse to always be in the mix for the most part. I feel like a bottoming out of Syracuse. I'm not saying they're going to have a Louisville year yet necessarily, but with teams like Wake, with teams like Notre Dame, with teams like potentially Louisville, with teams like Pitt that are kind of clogging up the middle to the upper half of the ACC, I think they could struggle a little bit. And I would be lying if I said this didn't have a little bit to do with a guy they got in the portal. Who knows how much he's going to get to play, because they do have Naheem McLeod in there too. But Eddie Lampkin, I just really hate in any locker room, because there's not a bigger me guy, I think, in all of college basketball. So like when you add him into the big men fold, like Chris Bell is super talented. I like JJ Starling, but other than that, it's like a lot of things I think have to go right for them to be consistently better than a lot of those other teams that we've talked about. And especially if some egos in that locker room become a little bit of a problem mid-season, I think it's going to be pretty unfortunate for Syracuse this year.
Well, they do have one positive. They added the Mount St. Mary's head coach as their head assistant coach. That could be the difference. Yeah. But besides that, it's all negatives. It's all negatives. Yep. Yeah. All jokes aside, I am out on Syracuse this season. When Boeheim is out, I'm out. That program, I don't think it's going to get any better. Although they have the NIL money, I just don't see it turning around. And I really don't like the pieces on their roster right now. I don't.
No. Feels like they're clogged in the front court a little bit.
They're just treading water, man. They're not bringing in any game changers. They're not making changes they need to make. I'm not liking what's going on up there in Syracuse.
No.
I'm not. Look, I opened up the ACC segment here, talking about how we're going to find this year's NC State, right? What's the team this year that's going to be a freak? Who's the team out of nowhere that's going to win the ACC like VT did a couple years ago? And then next year they just become irrelevant, right? Well, I think NC State might be that fraud this season after making a run last year. Hear me out. Not only are they getting zero respect at all, by the books and in the odds, which is probably the most important thing, to be completely honest with you, and probably the most telling thing, considering they made it to the Final Four last year, and now they're projected to be one of the worst teams in the ACC. That's not a good sign from the books. And then you look at the roster. They're toast. They're toast. They lose DJ Burns. They lose their spark plug. And they return Michael O'Connell, their only returning starter, who just went nuts in the tournament, sure. But is he the guy? I really don't think he is, respectfully, to be completely honest with you. I think he just went through a legacy run. And look, they return, who was it? Middlebrooks, I believe, is returning as well. A couple of those role players who came off the bench when they went on their little run last year are coming back. Jaden Taylor, sure. It's not going to be enough. Their stars are gone. I think after a great run last year, they take a significant step back, and you're going to see people wanting to back them, thinking, oh, they went on a run last year. You're going to see people blindly betting NC State this season, thinking they're goods. They're probably going to get a little bit more respect on the spreads early on in the season than they should. This is a team we should be fading immediately. NC State, they lost their talent. They lost their mojo. They lost their spark plug. They're done. Their magic is over. It's worn off. It's going to move on to another team in the ACC. It's what it does every year. Fade NC State this season. They're going to be a fraud.
Yeah, I'll be fading. Early, I was checking out their non-conference because I 100% agree with you. They have games against Purdue, they have games against Texas, and they have a game against Kansas. I probably will fade them in every single one of those games because got to do it early. I don't think they returned enough. I'm right there with you.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about who's winning the ACC conference this year, and then we'll wrap it up and we'll move and we'll groove. But Jovan, let me ask you, man, who is winning the ACC?
I think it's Duke, but I'll preface it with this. I only put Duke because I know you were sure as fuck not going to put Duke. I've never seen – I don't know if I've ever seen preseason a conference future more than one time. It's usually not a market that too many people are like tapping into with Twitter PIDs and shit. I've seen Duke a million times to win the ACC. So that's –
Then why are you taking it?
It's probably – I'm not taking it. I'm just putting it out there that – it's probably Cookie, and it's probably going to be UNC. But it's hard for me to say really anybody else but Duke, especially because Duke is one of the few teams I actually have gotten to put eyes on in the preseason a little bit, and preseason is preseason. But, I mean, they're unbelievably deep, like deep to a point where I can't even fathom it, that Cooper Flag, doesn't have to put up Zion-type numbers because, I mean, that team is – got shooting at every single level. It's got great defenders at every single level. So, I do think there's going to be quite a few spots to fade Duke. I don't think they're going to go out and just murder everybody like everybody thinks they are, but I think they're just going to wear teams down over the course of a conference season. So it'll be tough in the ACC to really be that much better than every other team or than the UNCs or even the Wakes of the world that are probably going to be inching up close to them, or the Clemsons like you'll talk about. But I think they edge it out.
Well, I don't. I agree with what you said about them having the deepest team. This has to be the deepest team that we've seen Duke have since Coach K's left, right? This has to be the deepest team they've had in the last couple seasons here. I don't disagree, but they're going to have to rely a lot on young talent and big moments, and that's not a team that I want to back to win a championship. That's not a team that I want to back to win a conference title. That's a team I want to back to win a lot of games in the regular season, 100%. But is that a team that I want to back to win when the lights are the brightest and they got to put the ball in the hands of a 21-year-old? Probably not. Me personally. Sure, Duke the most talented. Duke is the most talented roster probably in college basketball this season. And there's a lot of loaded teams. And Duke's probably the best of them all, which is crazy to say. But they're a little too young for me. I know they got some veterans in Proctor and Caleb Foster. It's not enough for me. Then you look at UNC. UNC is going to be good again, but I'm not buying in. I do like Cade Tyson coming over from Belmont. Don't get me wrong, but I think they had their little run last year. I don't think they run it back again this season. I don't think Hubert Davis is as good of a coach as he's been rewarded with, to be completely honest with you. I think the college basketball gods will not smite him, but I think he will have a regression year and they will not go on a run this season, and he will not get carried by his talented team. Something will go wrong with UNC. Wake Forest, I like. I like that you mentioned that team. I was close to picking them as my conference winner. I do still really like them, and I think that's a pretty good look. But there's another team that I don't think heard no bell yet, and that's the Clemson Tigers, a team I haven't heard a single peep about, and for good reason. Be kind of weird if I did, right? But let's not forget this team went on a run in the tournament last year, and they played some of their best basketball at the end of the season down the stretch. They did, and they have an underrated coach. And at home, they win games. They might not win on the road, but they win at home. And for me, that's good enough to at least put them in a spot in the regular season where they're going to be a higher seed and give them a chance. And they still have who I think is one of the best players in the conference in Chase Hunter. This kid's a stud. I like Clemson this year. I'll take veteran talent on a team that played their best ball at the end of last season. They went on a run. It wasn't enough. They finally lost, sure. But I think they come back with a vengeance. And I think they carry that momentum and mojo from the end of last season. And I'm backing Chase Hunter and the Clemson Tigers to shock the world and win the ACC.
I don't hate that. That's one of the few teams that I don't know, made a crazy run through last year that I really don't want to fade. But I don't know if I want to back them too much either. I'm just a little worried about the playmaking now that PJ Hall's gone. And they're going to have to – I don't know what they're going to do with Shefflin minutes if they're just going to play him at the 5 or put Victor Lycan somewhere in there too and still go Twin Towers like they did with PJ Hall and Shefflin or what. But I don't know. That could be a team I think turns it on pretty late in like the ACC season and kind of squeaks their way up there.
Yep. I agree. Let's not let Wake Forest get swept, though. Cameron Hildreth, Efton Reed coming back. They've got some dogs on Wake Forest. Also another pretty good luck to win this conference.
Dogs. I think Hunter Sal is going to put up like Naismith numbers this year.
Whoa.
I think he's going to be amazing.
Two teams that are getting respect from the odds makers in this conference that aren't Duke and North Carolina. Wake Forest and Clemson. Wake Forest and Clemson.
Yeah.
Wake Forest has a lot of talent on that team. Clemson, I feel like maybe getting some respect from the run they went on last year. I don't know. I thought that was pretty weird, seeing them get some respect. Like both those teams. I'll go with Clemson, though, as my winner. Okay? Side note for all my Hokies listening, I'll keep this quick and brief. Guys, we are going to be bad. We deserve it. We put all of our coins into football. Mike Young, bless his heart. Hang him up. Grab your popcorn. Ride off into the sunset. Head down the street. You're a local from that area down there. Retire. Hang them up. Give the ball to somebody who's young and knows how to run an organization in the ACC, a program in the ACC under a time of NIL. You just had 2 of your starters this season poached from Vanderbilt. That is unacceptable. I don't care if they outpaid. I don't care if they don't want to be on this team anymore. It's unacceptable. After what Buzz Williams did to build this program up, we are ruining it. Ruining it. It sucks to watch. Hokies are going to stink this year. Once again, consecutive years, our best player a week before the fucking season leaves the team. Fab Miller. This year, it's because of the gambling stuff when he was at Temple. That's our own fault. How are we the only people that didn't see that shit? Last year, it was Rodney Rice leaving because he probably saw what we all saw happen during the season, and that team absolutely stinks. They're terrible. And he got out of there quick. I don't blame him. This year, our best player is supposed to be Fab Miller. He leaves right before the season. We're toast. Toast. Sorry, guys. We had our run. Hunter Couture took us to an ACC championship. We won an ACC title. That was fucking nuts. Enjoy it. That's all you're going to get. Move on. Stick to football, Hokies. All right, let's move. Let's groove. Let's talk Big Ten. All right, this conference is going to look a lot different this year, Jovan. They got Oregon, UCLA, USC, and Washington joining from the Pac-12. A lot of pressure on some of these teams in this conference as well, Jovan. Painter still needs to get a natty, plain and simple. Close but no cigar. Painter has to get a natty at some point. Izzo needs to reestablish his dominance and prove that he's an elite coach. And Michigan needs to figure out something. Do something. Figure it out. Pay somebody to come in and knows what they're doing to fucking fix that team. That's a joke. A lot of pressure for some of these programs, man. Why don't we get it started? I'll kick it to you. Who's a sleeper team you like in the Big Ten this season?
I'm going to go with Ohio State. And I'll preface this with saying out of the power conferences, I would say I like the Big Ten this year probably the least because I think outside of, I don't know, you could say Purdue, and I still think Illinois has a lot of question marks, even though they're going to be really good. Like the rest of the conference, I mean, take your shot because I think there's a bunch of teams that are going to be middling, a bunch of teams that are going to have upsets. Just the middle of this conference is a wash. I'll say that. So the team that I think has a little bit of upside because of what we saw towards the end of last season, some of the guys they brought in. I mean, obviously the coaching is a pretty big deal, and they started to gain some momentum towards the end of last year. They bring back a pretty veteran presence in Bruce Thornton. They also bring over Micah Parrish, which I think is a pretty big defensive addition for them in the backcourt. So I think that's enough, especially against, I don't know, these teams like, I mean, Iowa's not going to be able to guard a Park Carr. Wisconsin, I have no idea what they're going to be on a year-to-year basis. Teams like them, like Nebraska, like Northwestern, I don't know. The team out of that I see with the most upside, I think, could be Ohio State. So I will go with them.
The Buckeyes. They move on from their coach. Maybe good things start happening up there. I could see it.
You'd think. You would hope.
I could see it. Okay. What do you think about Oregon this year, man? Are you in on Oregon?
I'm not out.
Any thoughts on that team?
I'm not out on Oregon, but I don't know. With Oregon, it's kind of the same way. I know it was a little different because, like, football, I mean, they're so much better than everybody, but I guess this more applies to, like, somebody on the level of USC in football. I feel like the styles and the way that they play is going to, I don't know, kind of give them some troubles because they like to go out and run. Obviously, they have a big man presence in there, but I feel like they're going to get stuffed in a locker at times by some of these more physical teams. Even, I don't know, the middling teams like we're talking about, Wisconsin, and then Ohio State can do it at times. Teams like that, I feel like pose a little bit of a problem for Oregon. So like, I still think they're going to be good. They're just not one of my favorite looks per se.
Yeah, that's fair. I really like Dana Altman. I think he's a pretty good coach. I'm back in the Ducks. I like them as my sleeper. First year in this conference. I think they show up. I think they show out. I like some of the guys, some of the pieces they have on this team still. I do. They're not going to be elite right off the rip, but I like some of the pieces they have. Shilstad, I think, is a pretty fucking solid player. Talented. We haven't really seen it yet, but he was a 5-star prospect. Can we see him show up? I think we do. They also got TJ Bamba coming over as well. I think it could be Oregon. Shocking the world. I haven't heard a peep out of the Ducks. And this is a team that typically doesn't start out the strongest, but once they get, closer to the tournament time for their conference or even, the national tournament, March Madness, this team shows up out of nowhere sometimes. Remember Peyton Pritchard's run a couple years ago? Out of fucking nowhere, dudes. You know why that probably happened? Because of Coach Allman. I like him. Give me Oregon. I'm all in. I'll back Dana Altman's Ducks to be a sleeper in their new conference. First year, I think they make the biggest leap and impress the most in the Big Ten this season.
I can respect that. I can respect it for sure.
Okay. You got a fraud that you're eyeing in the Big Ten?
Yeah. And I don't know why. I'll say I do know why. It's because they made some additions in the portal, but I don't know why UCLA is ranked to start the season. I don't believe in some of the guys they added, I guess, nearly as much as anybody else or the AP voters do. They added Sky Clark. They added Tyler Bilodeau. They got Kobe Johnson from USC. I think those are all solid pieces, but I think this is people chasing the fact that UCLA is going to be in the Big Ten, and we're going to all of a sudden see that UCLA of old. I am out on UCLA. I think if we're talking play style too, I feel like they are the big team or the Big Ten team, which again, I guess also applies to football. The Big Ten team of the Pac-12 is kind of what I've always seen them as. Tough defensively, offense struggles. You don't really have shooting prowess almost anywhere. I guess they have a little bit more of that now. I'm just not fully buying into that team they're building over there. I feel like they're going to be faced with similar struggles. I feel like against teams with a lot more size than they have, they're going to struggle, which that applies to quite a few teams they're going to see in the upper echelon of the Big Ten. Just kind of out. I don't see it. I really don't.
I'm with you. Look, I know they made some mistakes, or Mick Cronin made some mistakes at UCLA. He went the European route 2 years ago. It bit him in the ass. I think this offseason he hit the portal hard. He's trying a new strategy. That could be good. That could be the difference. Is it going to be enough? I don't know. I'm with you. I think it's pretty clear. You could call them a fraud. Maybe that doesn't mean they end up being one of the worst teams in the conference, but maybe that means that they just end up not being ranked. I feel like a school like UCLA with that program, you could probably consider them a fraud if they don't end up ranked at some point this season. This is a blue chip program, UCLA, and they might be frauds again this season. They had a lot of work to do, man. They got a lot of work to do. They were terrible last season.
Everybody's just expecting all the transfers and Dylan Andrews, I guess, of course. I didn't mention him, but expecting all of them to just mesh well on the court, and UCLA is going to take this big jump. I think they'll be all right. And part of that's because it's hard not to be when you're playing some of the bottom level Big Ten teams, but ranked team off the jump, I don't know if I see it. I'm not there.
I'm with you. I think UCLA is going to be a fraud again this season. They might be a little bit better than last year, but they're not going to be great. They might be good. They're not going to be great. And in my eyes, I think that considers them to be a fraud. This is UCLA we're talking about here. Come on.
Fair.
I got a fraud as well. I know I talked about it a little bit earlier. That's, I typically don't like back in youth, although a lot of the best players in college basketball are freshmen. That's how it goes. But when the lights are bright, I don't know if I want my coins on a young team. And I'm looking at Rutgers, one of the youngest, best teams in college basketball, a team that has 2 top 5 prospects on their squad for this upcoming season, and Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, right? You got these 2 kids that everybody keeps talking about. They're saying these 2 18-year-olds are going to lead Rutgers to the promised land. And look, I guarantee you there will be games this season where those 2 guys take over and they look like one of the best teams in college basketball. For sure. There will be a couple games like that. There's also going to be some games where you're watching them play and you're wondering, probably more early on in the season when they're still figuring it out, these are 2 of the top 5 prospects in the country playing. And I'll tell you what, there's going to be some learning curves in a very good conference, the Big Ten. It's not going to be easy for those 2 gents to establish themselves in that conference. It's a big leap from high school. Come on, gents. And I know they're going to be goods. One of those 2 guys will probably end up being a stud NBA player. Okay, maybe not both of them, but they'll both have a chance. One of them will probably end up being really goods. I'm not diminishing their talent. What I am diminishing is they lost their big man in Big Cliff, who's gone. He was a big presence down low. He transferred. And they got these 2 18-year-olds coming in. Is that going to be enough to win games? It's going to be enough to look really good in half their games. But is it going to be enough to put them, at the top of the standings at the end of the year or winning games that matter towards the end of the season? I don't think so. And I need to see it. I'm out on Rutgers, a team that has a lot of hype, a lot of young talent. But the books aren't giving them respect on the odds. And if they're not giving them respect, I certainly am not.
Yeah. You couldn't have said it any better, said anything that I don't want to say. It's a lot of pressure on a whole new team, essentially, or just big pieces that you're going to play ISO ball with pretty much the entirety of the season. To expect that to just be elite level talent, elite level production off the jump, I think is jumping the gun a little bit. I think you're going to have games, like you said, where they're absolutely unstoppable, and maybe you see those on the biggest stage against some of the teams. I think they have a couple big non-conference games, but it's hard to buy in immediately. I want to see their team that I'm definitely like, once we come to January, I want to see what they are. Because if they're really good and they're meshing early, I'll buy in, but certainly not going to be there from the start of the season.
Their veterans don't impress me on this squad. Jeremiah Williams, Zach Martini, PJ Hayes. I don't think these guys are moving needle. I just don't think they're going to be able to have enough talent with those vets when guys like Ace and Dylan are not locked in when the lights are bright. I'm out on Rutgers. They're going to be frauds this season.
No.
Let's talk about conference winners who we've got in the Big Ten. And obviously there's a team that's, pretty heavily favored still, even after losing Zach Edey to the NBA. And that's Purdue. And that's who I've got as my conference winner. And correct me if I'm wrong, you have them as well as your conference winner.
Also do. Yeah.
Okay.
ACC and Big Ten chalk for me, unfortunately.
All right. I like Purdue as well. I talked about it a little bit earlier. Painter needs a natty. He's a great coach, one of the greatest coaches to not get one yet. I think he might even get one this season. Not saying that's the one team that I would pick if I had to, but it's one of them for sure because of the angle alone of Zach Edey leaves. They didn't do it last year. Who's going to believe in them doing it this year? I will, because I'm a contrarian and I've seen it happen before. Sometimes when the best player of a team leaves, that's when that team plays at their best because they see that guy thriving somewhere else and they want to get involved and they want to start getting some attention. They want to start shining. They want to start showing up. And I think you see the rest of this Purdue team, after losing a star like Zach Edey, showing up and showing out. And I don't think that's that hard of a take, to be completely frank with you. And they still have plenty of talent around them, still without Edey. They got Braden Smith, who's one of the best point guards in the country. He is. Okay, I know he had a couple games where he looked like a ghost last season, but overall, he's a very good veteran, and he can control the floor. They got some other big names as well. They got some athletes in Camden Hyde and Miles Colvin. They got Trey Kaufman-Wren coming in. He might have a breakout year stepping in for Edey. They have enough bodies, and in a year where nobody believes in them after they lose Zach Edey, I'll back them, and I'll back Painter because he needs to get one.
Yeah, I'm in. I think, they're relying on some kind of big man development, which I think if you're Purdue, obviously that's been the centerfold of your offense for a bit now. I still think that's a fine place to be because I believe the guards taking a bigger stronghold of that offense this year is kind of a certainty, and I feel confident that they'll be able to succeed in that. And whatever body you throw in there, I think is going to have success, especially since some of the guys that are at the very least playing the four, kind of along with the big man, are experienced
Trey Kaufman-Wren. Remember the name. Trey Kaufman-Wren. He will be this year's Zach Edey for them. Won't be as good, but he'll be filling in. He'll be doing enough. Purdue wins the Big Ten again. They do it. I'm not getting cute here. I'm taking the favorite.
Sure.
Let's move on to the Big 12. This is a fun conference. You ready?
Really fun conference.
Yeah, this conference is crazy. It's insanely deep. And look, they add Arizona, Colorado, Arizona State, and Utah this season. Are you fucking kidding me? There's a reason why they call this the king of the conferences. Okay, it just plain and simply is. Okay, this is the king of the conferences, the Big 12, the deepest conference of college basketball by far, Jovan, very excited to hear your thoughts. Why don't we get it started out with some sleeper talk?
I'm going to go with Texas Tech because there's a lot of teams, I guess, kind of similar to the Big Ten, except they're actually good. I guess a better comp would be the ACC, but a bunch of teams in the middle that I think are super competitive, and you can give an argument for a lot of these teams. Like Cincinnati, I guess you'll talk about. They're ranked. I love that team, and I'm excited to hear you talk about them. There's a lot of teams that are kind of borderline ranked that I think are going to take a pretty big step up. Team that's kind of flying under the radar, I say, would be Texas Tech. They feel like that team who's going to spawn with a pretty decent resume in non-conference and then have some pretty big wins to start the Big 12 season. I love their roster. I think this is an interesting team that they're building over there. They still have shooters like Chance McMillan. They brought in Elijah Hawkins. They brought in Federico from Pitt. They still have Devon Cambridge. Like, it's a lot better team talent-wise. They ran into some injury issues last year, which really held them from reaching their ceiling, but it's a tough team, and they always run a nice defensive system down there. I feel like with this cast specifically, I think this has the chance to be one of the better defending teams that they've ever had in Texas Tech. And not only that, but Pop Isaacs is gone. And as much as I loved betting on him for prop purposes, addition by subtraction. He is
might be a good thing for winning purposes. Yep.
Yeah, great thing for winning purposes. So, yeah, we can talk about that when we get into the Big East, talk about his new team. But I think this team is going to be a thorn in every single Big 12 team's side. Like, I can't wait for the game where I don't even know if they play Kansas at home, but when they're at home against a big team like Kansas, Houston, Baylor, whoever they end up playing, and their favorites are super short on a big Monday, can't wait because I'll be taking them.
Sign me up. I'm in. I can always back the Red Raiders to do something and shock the world and overperform. I'm in. Although I think I have a better sleeper. Might be a little bit biased. You already mentioned him. Cincy. Now, Cincy is getting some respect in this economy preseason, as they fucking should be. Don't let Cincy get hot. It might be too late. And I'll tell you what, I'm a big Wes Miller guy. It's long overdue here. It's long overdue for Coach Wes. Let's give Coach Wes his time. Let's give him his flowers. He's so fucking due. And I'll tell you what, he's got a couple stars that he has been grooming, growing, developing, whatever the fuck you want to call it, in Dan Skillings and Day Thomas. These kids who he has developed himself are going to be at their best this upcoming season. This Cincy team, watch out for them. I'm telling you right now, they are going to be a force to be reckoned with. Watch out for the sophomore, Jizzle James, maybe the best name in college basketball. Yep, that's his name, Jizzle James. Watch out for him. Cincy is good. Cincy's getting respect. Cincy's a tough place to play at. Those students show up. They show out. That place is loud. And I'll tell you right now, not a coach in college basketball who's more due for a basketball to bounce his way than Coach Miller. Give the guy a fucking break. This guy's been grinding his ass off for a decade. He deserves it. He's a great guy. He's a great coach. They have the best team he's had in years down there. I'm excited to see Cincy play. I think they're a serious sleeper in the Big 12 this upcoming season.
Yeah, I'm glad you had it as your sleeper because I definitely wanted to talk about them. Getting a lot of respect preseason, which I didn't necessarily expect. I thought I was going to be kind of on an island with that take, but I think everybody knows at this point that team's fucking deep, dude. I think when we get to Kansas City, where the Big 12 championship is, I think they're going to be playing in that last game.
They already showed last year in their first year in this conference. They already showed they're capable of it. They pulled off big upsets against BYU at BYU. They beat your squad, Texas Tech. They had some they beat Kansas last year.
Yeah, they beat Kansas, and that was when they weren't even really playing well.
They proved that although, sure, they weren't consistent, right? Sure, they had some mistakes, some bad games. They got to work out some kinks, but they are more than capable of winning games in this conference. And I'll tell you right now, if you don't have the Bearcats circled as a team to be a sleeper in the Big 12, you're wrong. This team's going to be fucking good this season. Yeah, watch out.
They're going to defend the hell out of the ball, too.
Watch out.
I don't know how you score against some of the lineups they're going to put out there. You know,
they got Bandiago down low, who's literally, Shaq.
Goated.
Is that who you're going to say?
No. I was going to say, I think Dylan Mitchell is going to be transformative this year for them because they've always had like decent big play, and he'll probably be playing the 4, or maybe they choose to go small and put him at the 5. But I think getting an athletic big in there is all the difference for them because, frankly, Victor Lakin always in foul trouble or just bogging everything down in the paint. Spacing was kind of off, so Dylan Mitchell I think is going to be super fun, and they have so many options there though. They're deep and they're going to be ridiculous.
Don't let the Bearcats get hot. It might be too late. Might be too late. Yeah, straight up. All right, let's talk about some frauds. Enough talking about good things about these teams and gassing them up. Let's beat some teams down. Give me your fraud in the Big 12. Who are you thinking is a team who everyone's loving, everyone's slurping, that you think is going to stink?
I don't think they're going to stink, but I'm staring at a number 5 ranking to start the year. I think that's expecting them to hit their ceiling like they did last year. I think I'm going to go with Iowa State, which, again, like this is still a roster I love. They're returning a lot of the same guys. Kashawn Gilbert's back. Like Momcilovic is going to be back. Curtis Jones is going to be back. So it's a lot of guys in that same system where I think they took a step up, like offensively last year. We saw that at times. Defensively, we saw some lapses, but overall, they were still the same tough-nosed Iowa State defensive team that I think we all know and love. They brought in some guys that I think is transitioning more towards offense. They're looking for more scoring options to be a little more consistent, and I think they get that, but comes at the cost of defense a little bit. I think, we saw the best of Iowa State last year during the regular season, especially when they're going into the Big 12 tournament. They started playing amazing ball, and especially in that run too. I don't know if we're getting better than that. And I feel like with where they're sitting, number 5 in the country, we're kind of expecting that out of the gate. I feel like some people are going to be a little disappointed when Iowa State drops a couple games they shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they overperformed last year, and don't get me wrong, Lipsy's a fucking beast. He's him. But I do agree with you. They might not be bad. They're not going to be bottom of the basement, bottom of the barrel in this conference, but they're not going to be as elite as they were last season.
Yeah.
Okay. They'll take a little step back. I'm in. My fraud this season is going to be Arizona. Look, this team, I don't know what it is. I'm just not a big fan. I know they added Trey Townsend coming in, and people are pretty excited about him. I mean, he had a great March Madness for Oakland, right? You guys remember him, the forwards who was keeping them in that game. They had Toby Awaka coming in from Tennessee. They got a pretty good player coming over from the Campbell Camels as well, who's getting gassed up. Del Orso coming in, a big guy. So Arizona, it looks like they have reinforcements, and then obviously Caleb Love and Jaden Bradley coming in hot. But I'm not buying it with this team. Year in and year out, this team gets hyped up. They're supposed to be good. They win games in the regular season, and then they don't do shit. They don't do anything. And I'll tell you right now, I am so out on Caleb Love. I don't think he's good. I don't think he's clutch. I think he's good in games that don't matter. I think he's good in garbage time. I don't think he's a good winner. I think he's a good stat stuffer, to be honest with you. I don't think he's a good teammate, so we don't need to go into that stuff at UNC, but not a big fan of Caleb Love and not a fan of Arizona. Not this season. I think this is, although on paper it looks like they bring in reinforcements, one of the least talented teams we've seen at Arizona in the last couple of years.
I agree. You know what's interesting too, because I think Caleb Love, I don't think he's really seen a lot of this, but like the Big 12, they have really good on-ball defenders, like that they're going to put on a lot of these point guards, which that's what kind of makes taking prize picks and props kind of fun, because you can target everybody else other than the guy who's going to be smothered the entire game. Every time I've seen him in a really tough matchup, he doesn't respond very well. He either goes ghost or just kind of disappears from the game. I wonder if he's going to have a pretty tough time against some of the defenses. I mean, especially like Iowa State stands out, of course. Houston stands out. Cincinnati stands out. Texas Tech stands out. Kansas State stands out. I think he's going to fold in a lot of those games. So, I mean, I'm with you.
This conference is insane. It's absolutely insane. The worst projected team in this conference is supposed to be Oklahoma State. And although, sure, they're not going to be good, that team could beat anybody at home.
Literally
any given night.
Anybody in this conference can beat anybody. Like
Colorado and Utah are in the basement of this conference projected, and these guys have NBA players on their team still. I know they're taking a step back, both those squads, but those are good, respected programs. Come on. This conference is stacked. You got West Virginia adding in, Darian DeVries and Tucker DeVries coming over from Drake. There's some excitement going on in West Virginia. I mean, there are cool things going on in this conference, even at the shittier schools that haven't done much recently. They're revamping. This really is the king of the conferences. I'm stoked to watch some Big 12 basketball. And before we move on, if you didn't think I was giving you the floor to talk about your frogs, you're crazy. Go ahead. The floor is yours. Let's go ahead and hear it.
Yeah, we'll make this click. I'm in a similar spot, or we're in a similar spot that you are. We're not going to.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
Not as bad. Not as bad. Not as bad. But you got to also remember the competition too. Like going to the Big 12 gauntlet, I think is going to be a problem. Like I would love to say I'm super excited about, I don't know, Frankie Collins, like super excited about Noah Reynolds, our guy. Like Wenzel's also coming. Trezarian White is an absolute dog. There's just not enough punch there. They're like, I would like to look at the roster and say they're deep enough, but realistically, I think the scoring is going to be a little bit of a problem, and there's a lot of new pieces pretty much everywhere you look. I'm worried. They're always going to get like the home upset, like everybody in the Big 12 does, and they'll play tough against some teams they shouldn't on the road. But I'm not too excited to watch TCU basketball this year.
Haley Van Lith coming in, could be a sharpshooter coming off the bench.
More excited to watch the women's team, to be honest with you.
Okay, well. That could be for other reasons. We'll leave it at that. I will say this before we move. Look, known you for a couple years. We've talked sports for a couple years. The higher you are on your TCU Frogs on the hardwood, the worse they do. The least you believe in them, the less you believe in them, the better they do, I feel like. So maybe this is a good thing. Maybe this is a good thing.
I don't know. I've been pretty high on them the last couple years. Last year was definitely the lowest point, and that was the year they missed the tournament. So
I thought you thought they'd be kind of good before the season last year, though. You're kind of excited about those boys.
I did, but once Big 12 play started, it died down pretty quickly.
I mean, you figured out pretty quick. Yeah, they weren't.
I was preparing myself for what I thought was going to happen the rest of the season. So we'll see. This is the first year in a couple of years I'm really going in with super low expectations. So we'll see how it plays out.
Could be a good thing.
I hope I'm wrong.
Could be a good thing, and I hope you're wrong, too. Because I have a feeling we might be finding ourselves in that arena down there watching a game at some point.
Oh, we for sure will. They'll win. They'll win a big game.
Probably.
Down there. They always do.
Okay. Awesome. Well, you want to talk some conference winners for the Big 12 here before we move and groove?
Sure.
Who do you got?
I'm going to go Houston. And you're going to talk about somebody else that I also really liked. But I do kind of take them every year. It doesn't work out. But Houston, I'm excited because this is a year. I know they're losing head of the snake, Jamal Shed, but they had a lot of really bad injury luck last year, whether it was Terrence Arsenault, who's going to be back and fully healthy. LJ Cryer got hurt for a little bit. Javier Francis got hurt a little bit. And he's also kind of banged up coming into this year, but should be fine for the season opener. I'm excited for a full season for this defense to really lock in because they are so talented. They are so deep. They even bring in guys that I think could be, added offensive options. They bring in Miles Uzan from Oklahoma, who's a guy who's very familiar with the Big 12 and kind of a crafty point guard. So he might be the starting point guard. I really don't know what they're going to do there, but this team, it was really deep going into last year. Then everybody got hurt, which was stuff kind of out of their control. I feel like they get their get back now coming into this season and have a really dominant year that hopefully towards the end, once you start getting into Kansas City territory, you're not injury riddled. You're going to have a full go come March.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't blame you for picking Houston, although music to my ears hearing that you pick Baylor every year. They haven't done it. Now you're switching, and I'm taking Baylor, and I'll talk about them in a moment. But, I mean, look, we'd have to be fools if we didn't gas up, or at least one of us didn't pick Houston, or at least say they have a significant chance to win this conference this season. I mean, they're stacked. They win games. They have an elite coach. They have a great culture. They play defense, which I love backing, especially when the lights are bright. I want a defensive team over an offensive team 9.5 times out of 10 because that team when the lights are bright wins. When the shots aren't going in, you got to rely on other parts of the game to win and dominate. And Houston does that. That's a given on the defensive side of the ball. And I'm very excited to see, how they play again this season after a really good year last year. I mean, I don't know how someone doesn't pick Houston. It's good to hear you did.
Yeah.
Manuel Sharp, Juwan Roberts, these guys are fucking studs. LJ Cryer, beasts.
I will say, you could say this for, I guess, a lot of team schedules in the Big 12, but the schedule makers for Houston, whoever crafted that up, did them absolutely not a singular favor. You want to hear this end of the regular season, Krabs?
Yeah.
They host Iowa State. Then they go to Texas Tech on a big Monday. They come back in the weekend. They host Cincinnati. Another big Monday. They host Kansas. Then on the weekend, they go to Baylor. That's their last 5 games of the season.
That's brutal.
Houston, I mean, they're built for that. But holy shit, that is one of the hardest stretches I have ever seen.
I mean, I don't know if anybody's built for that. Now, what that tells me, they'll probably be ranked 1 the majority of the season because they have an easy schedule that's backloaded, right? So easy schedule at the beginning of the year. It's backloaded with all their tough games that you just mentioned, right? So
yeah,
I feel like maybe they start out strong and then you get some of those tough games at the end of the year. Maybe they lose 2 of those games. And if they do, people are going to lose their shit. They're going to say, Houston's not the same team they were last year. It's going to be a complete overreaction. And then we strike and we bet them to win the night after they lose a couple of those games.
They do kind of play the whole bottom of the Big 12 to start on early January.
Start, and then they'll start dealing with some adversity before, the conference tourney, which is honestly probably perfect. If you could ask their coach what he prefer, it's probably that. You get a couple losses out of the way right before the conference tourney. You don't want those losses coming in the conference tourney. You don't want those losses coming to March Madness. You do, your season's over.
Yeah.
I think that could end up being a good thing for them.
It's probably what's going to happen, though. I kind of hate that. I think the better team, because I know you're going to talk about Baylor, I think the better team come actual March Madness, is probably Kansas. I feel like they're assembling the Avengers over there. They finally have shooters after last year. Like Bill Self said, I'm not making this mistake again. And that roster is also ridiculous. Defense may be a little questionable, but I feel like their team maybe a little better built for March.
You could say that. I certainly could. Dude, I feel like I'm a little bit too high on Baylor, and you've been hinting at it. That's my conference winner in the Big 12. I mean, I'm just so high on this team, almost too high on this team right now. I'm a little bit concerned. Love the coach, love the program. That stuff's all given. I don't even need to go into that shit. You guys know that. Come on, it's Baylor. But the pieces they've added, I love the pieces that they've added, man. Last year, what held them back, in my opinion, they didn't have the veterans. They had the talent. They didn't have the veterans. They had Jacoby Walter and Yves Missy, who are fucking beasts. Don't get me wrong. Great NBA talents. Those kids are studs. But are those the guys you want on your team when you're trying to win a natty? You're trying to win your conference? Maybe not. Maybe not. To be honest with you, if they did, they would have fucking won it. I'm looking at this team that's completely revamped. You bring in a couple guys in the portal, some veterans, Jeremy Roach and Norchad Omier, who talent-wise are not as good as Jacoby Walter and Yves Missy. Give me a break. They're not. Right? Those are 2 different groups of players right there. You got 2 great college players, and you got 2 great NBA talents. But I want to back the college players that are great when I'm making college bets, and I'm betting Baylor to win this conference. I think they, addition by subtraction, like you talked about earlier with some of these teams, they might not have more talent on their team, but I think they're a better team this season because they have Jeremy Roach, who, in my opinion, is going to be the most motivated point guard in the country. And that's the kind of guy I want my coins on, who's got plenty of miles, plenty of experience, and he's a leader. And he's looking to prove some people wrong this season. Just wait. Okay? Just wait. Norchad Omier. I mean, this guy, I could praise this dude for an hour talking about his game. He does it all. He's like Ali Khalifa, but better. He's a great big man. Maybe not as good of a passer as Ali Khalifa and Nikola Jokic, like we were talking about before, but he's a good big man. He can move. He can pass a little bit too. He can do it all a little bit, but he's going to be a presence, a veteran presence, a smart presence in that paint for this team that Misi had the talent. He might not have known what to do up here at all times. Might have cost him some games down there. Might have had some stupid fouls. More talented player, don't get me wrong. Norchad Omier knows what to do, though. And I want my coins on Norchad Omier. I want my coins on Jeremy Roach. I want my coins on this new and improved addition by subtraction Baylor team that doesn't look as talented on paper. But in my opinion, they're a better basketball squad, and they're going to win more games.
I think they look pretty damn talented, Krabs. Because, they have...
I mean, I didn't even mention 2 guys, Langston Love and obviously the dude you were talking about earlier, Josh Odawanga. Is that how you say his last name?
That's not even who I was talking about, but Ojonwuna has been a force in there for a while, but
yeah,
I love all the guys that they added. And I guess I know a little bit more about this guy because I paid attention. Probably not too many people are looking at this as a guy to pay attention to, but Jalen Celestine from Cal is coming over, who's a big lefty shooter. He's like 6'7" and plays fantastic defense. Like, I think the big thing with Baylor is like they have the classic Baylor freshman that is going to be fantastic. I think VJ Edgecombe, like I said, I think he's the best freshman in college basketball, better than Cooper Flagg. But they also have a guy named Robert Wright, third, who not many people are going to talk about, but I think they're going to learn about very quickly. That's as talented as of a 1-2 freshman class I think we've seen in the Big 12 in quite a while. But you also bring back not only some experience kind of around him or around them with Roach and Omier and Celestine, but there's also size. The one problem with Baylor is also every single year they're pretty small because a lot of their production is coming from guards. So like any bigger team can kind of have their way with them if they have bigger guards. You can't really do that this year. Roach is still small, obviously, but like Celestine is going to be in there probably playing the 3, maybe the 4 at like 6'7". Like Edgecombe is 6'5". Robert Wright is probably going to be playing 6-man. He's 6'1", so still small like Jeremy Roach. But like Omier also 6'7". Like size is there, Krabs. I think they're that team. I think this is going to be one of the most fun Baylor teams we've seen in quite a few years. Edgecombe, appointment television too. Appointment television.
I have seen different things about Edgecombe, and I will trust your opinion. I've seen people say that he's going to be the best player in this draft class. He's going to be a generational NBA talent. I've also seen highlights that look like they were taking on a potato of this kid playing in the Bahamas back in the day. I don't know. I haven't seen as much on this kid probably as you have, but I will trust you. I mean, look, he's a 5-star recruit coming in. He's going to be a fucking beast, and he's going to have the rock in his hands, and he's going to start right off the rip. He's from the Bahamas. Could he be the next Buddy Hield? You have a player comp for him, the way he plays. Have you seen any tape on this kid?
I don't even know what to say for a player comp, dude. He's like one of the most electric athletes I think Baylor's going to have had for quite some time. I don't even know what to compare him to.
Anthony Edwards?
Anthony Edwards could be a decent comp. He's also like a really good defender. So like that's, again, one of the differences between him and some of the other Baylor freshmen that have come through. So yeah, maybe an Anthony Edwards that's a little better of a defender, maybe not quite as good a three-point shooter, but he's explosive.
VJ Edgecombe. Remember the name.
Yep.
That's the guy that Jovan said is going to get drafted ahead of Cooper Flagg. We'll see if it happens.
Yeah. We'll see.
Okay. Awesome. Love it. And I love Baylor to win the Big 12 this year. Let's move. We got a couple other conferences to talk about. This is turning into a Megalodon pod. To all the listeners out there, stick with us. Make sure you're following us on YouTube at Bookit Sports. Subscribe, turn the notice on, and check out some of those other videos on there as well. We're live every day talking about bets, winners for that night. We got Bookit with Trent on there, going over winners as well, crafting up prize picks lineups. You name it, we're betting it. Get involved. Okay, check out Bookit Sports on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music, we appreciate you. Leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing. Okay, we appreciate you guys for listening. Let's move and groove and talk about the SEC. It's been a weird year, I feel like, for the SEC in basketball. Bama's now a college basketball powerhouse. That came out of nowhere. Holy shit. Probably should have seen it coming with the NIL shit going on, but they're a wagon. They're not just a football school anymore. My goodness. You got Coach Cal moving to a rival Arkansas out of fucking nowhere from Kentucky. That's crazy. This is going to be an insane year in the SEC. I'm stoked for it. I think we're all excited to see how it plays out at Kentucky and Arkansas. We're all going to have our eyes peeled on both those programs the majority of the season. But Jovan, even the worst projected team in the SEC, Vanderbilt, is looking like they're going to have a solid program. The worst teams in this conference look like they could beat some of the middle teams and some of the other good conferences. This conference is deep as heck this season. Maybe the deepest the SEC has ever been. I'm excited to talk about it with you. Maybe we start out by talking some sleepers.
Yeah, I've got a sleeper. I like Georgia. And it's funny that it comes after, I think, the best year that Florida basketball has had in quite a few years, which Mike White has probably kicking himself looking at. But now he's at Georgia, and I think this is pretty easily the best roster he's assembled since he's been there, especially the backcourt. The backcourt super talented, both with guys that have been there and guys that have, transferred there. Blue Kane, Silas DeMary, absolute goats. I think they're going to be ridiculous in there. They bring in Asa Newell, Jaden Newell there too. So a little punch of guys that are super talented. And they also bring in two guys. One of the guys I think you'll be pretty happy to hear that I'm mentioning, Tyron Lawrence from Vandy, who I think is a guy that can control the offense, but also Mount St. Mary's transfer, your boy Dakota LeFew, who I think they have so many pieces in that backcourt. It's like usually Georgia's a team that I think everybody kind of just expects to be middle of the pack. Like they're never really going to get any big wins, but they're going to take care of some of the bottom tier teams in the SEC and maybe lose a game they shouldn't, but just be average. I feel like this is the year that they actually take that step. Maybe not quite as good as Florida did last year, but kind of similar. Maybe they're like the SEC version of what Wake was last year, kind of hanging around the bubble. And I think they sneak into the tournament, unlike Wake. So they're my team that I'll be betting and looking forward to a little bit.
I do want to waste some time talking about Ole Miss as my sleeper in the SEC. Hear me out. Okay, hear me out. This Ole Miss team, look, they're getting some respect. Okay, they're getting some respect, as they should. They're getting some preseason AP rankings. Do not let this team get hot. It might be too late, to be completely honest with you. I'll tell you what, Chris Beard is a great coach. Might not be a great guy, but he's a great coach. Okay, he's going to get that program turned around. And Ole Miss, who finished last year 20-12 overall, I think 7-11 in the SEC, I believe. Remember how hot of a start they got out to last year? They were that team that just wouldn't lose. They would cover. They would win. They would pull off the upsets. They were the worst fucking team to bet against in the beginning of last season. They were so annoying. I kept trying to fade them. They kept winning. Then they kind of fell off. Teams figured out how to cover them. Well, I think Chris Beard comes back with a vengeance this season. I think he pulls some of that mojo from earlier on last year back into the season, and they still have some dogs. They got Musa Cisse. They've got Jamarian Sharp, who's a stud. They've got Drake Davis coming over from Seton Hall. And most importantly, they got Sean Padula coming over running the point from VT, who is a very good point guard. Can't play like a defense. That guy could put the ball in the hoop. Let's not act like Ole Miss plays defense anyways. Come on, they win with points. That's how they're going to win again this season. That's how they're going to win again this season with Chris Beard. Do not let Ole Miss get hot. We saw them get out to a great start last season. They kind of fizzled out. I think they carry that momentum from last year, though, when nobody expected them to do anything. And Chris Beard has an even better Ole Miss team this season. Last year, they were 20-12. I think they're even better this year. Don't be surprised if Ole Miss makes a run at the SEC title this season.
Yeah, I think they'll be all right. I'm not fully there with you on Ole Miss. Not fully there. I just my thing with Ole Miss, you talked about it. They're not going to play any defense, which can win them games against the lower tier of the SEC. But I have a problem with them getting in track meets with, I don't know, Kentucky, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, those type of teams, because they're going to have to really do that to make any noise in the SEC. I just don't think they're going to be able to do it consistently enough to where I can fully buy in. I do think they'll be a team that can beat the shit out of some of those LSUs and Vandys of the world, though. So I will for sure be in on those.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some frauds. What team are you thinking in the SEC this year is going to be a big-time fraud?
Yeah, fraud collab here. Me and you on Texas.
Sure. Not a good year for Texas upcoming.
No,
not seeing good things.
I'm looking at this team. It looks somewhat talented on paper, I guess you could say, even though it's probably the least talented team Texas had in a couple of years, I would say. You got Arthur Kaluma, you got Trem and Mark, you have Jordan Pope. Those are all super ball dominant. I need to take 20 shots. I need to control the offense type guys. And I don't know, simply put, I don't think the coaching situation is good enough for me to believe that they can get that under control. Because I feel like nothing is going to flow there. Rodney Terry, I think he honestly had a pretty good situation fall into his lap year one when he took over. And they, anointed him as actually God for what he did in that first season. It's been all downhill ever since, and nobody really wants to talk about it. I don't think the guy's that good of a head coach. And with all of these pretty much me guy players that are all volume driven players, he's going to have a masterclass of a year, I think, for them to live up to what their expectations are this year, which, I mean, they're sitting ranked 19th preseason, which I also think is kind of nuts. I feel like the SEC is going to drain them too, dude, especially being that you have the Ole Misses, you have the Floridas, you have the Arkansas, you have the Kentuckys, even without Calipari. Like, you have all of these teams that are going to run the hell out of them. I don't know that they can keep up. I really don't. And I think the tougher defensive teams, and you put them in the half court too, it's going to be really bad trying to craft some sort of offense around all three of those guys, especially.
I don't like their coach that much. I don't think Rodney Terry's the guy.
He's not, dude.
I think Rodney Terry did a really good job taking over during a bad situation and kept the team afloat and deserves credit for that. But I think he kind of got a handout job. And I don't think he's an elite coach. I think eventually you're going to see Texas kind of fade off a little bit here in their basketball team. And look, I mean, their program's not getting a lot of good looks preseason here, I'll be honest. They're getting disrespected. They're not getting good looks from the odds makers. They're not getting respect from the odds makers. They're projected to finish, anywhere from 8th to 10th in the SEC this season. People are kind of hip to how moose this team has been and how they're going to be this upcoming year. The big name Texas just doesn't carry the weight on the hardwood anymore. It does on the gridiron, not on the hardwoods. They're going to be bad again this year. I'm not a Terry guy. Yeah. I don't think they have the pieces either, man. Coach or players. I'm out.
Yeah. And they're going to have what?
I'm out.
Caden Shedrick playing the 5, maybe?
I mean, he's been around the block for a while. He probably will play the 5. They got Weaver, who's a guard, who's been around for a little bit. They got Jordan Pope. They got Tremont Mark. They got Julian Larry. They got decent bodies who have stats.
Yeah,
but these aren't guys I like to win games. These aren't winners. These aren't players that I want to see transfer to my team, respectfully. I don't think it's moving needle.
Yeah, I just don't like the composition of that team. Like, they're talented, sure. Like, they have scorers that like can go and get you a bucket at any time, but you have a big man that is not physical and probably shouldn't be a big man. Like, you have Weaver, who's like a change of pace transition guy, and then you got just bucket getters like that. Don't know if that works really. Like, maybe they can keep up in a certain track meet with one of these teams, but I don't think that's going to work.
I mean, maybe Trey Johnson, their 5-star they got coming in, maybe he's just Kevin Durant and just carries them. Maybe he's that good.
Yeah.
I don't know. I need to see it. That's really the only way I see Texas being good, but we'll see how good that 5-star is. I'm not liking the other pieces around him.
No.
Let's change the vibe. Let's talk about teams we do like in the SEC here. Teams we think are winning this conference. Jovan, who do you see winning the SEC?
I'll go Tennessee. And
wow.
Not with much conviction, because I think the top of that SEC, I think you're going to be able, once you get to, I don't know, early March when this is decided, I think it's going to be decided by a game, maybe 2, between them. And even though I think Alabama, I'm there with you, I think they're going to have their fair share of struggles. I think a lot of that comes in non-conference, and they eventually get it together in SEC play. Then I think there's probably going to be a sleeper up there. Maybe Florida. I don't know how much of a sleeper they would be considered. Like, Auburn will probably be up there too, but I'll go Tennessee. I think they're the team that, one of the rare teams, because there's a lot of teams that are not going to play much defense or defend well. You know what they're going to do on the defensive side of the ball, and they brought in some new pieces as well that we're very familiar with, whether it's Igor Milicic or Darwin Stone-Dubar, who's a guy that I really like from Hofstra, who we used to bet on quite a bit. I think they're going to be able to do the job. I think this defense is going to be nearly as good as ever. The issue, I guess, is finding that true scorer to replace Dalton Connect, which you really can't do. I feel like by committee, I do trust that team enough, especially when you're going to be playing some pretty weak defenses in the SEC. You got a lot of teams that can score, but not too many of them that can defend at a pretty high level. So I'm going to go with Tennessee.
Okay. Love the coach. Love buying low, I guess you could say, after Dalton Connect leaves. So I like that angle. I think it's going to come down to how healthy Zakai Ziegler is. Are his legs healthy? Does he look like the freshman that was running around the courts leading that offense? Or does he still look like the guy who's kind of hobbled, a little bit banged up from that ACL tear? I don't know. We'll see after another offseason arrest. Maybe Zakai Ziegler returns to being that guy that we know he is. But, I mean, look, you're putting your coins on Rick Barnes, who I think is still underrated. It's Chaz Lanier coming over from North Florida. We know that guy's a fucking bucket getter.
I think he has the potential. I'm not going to say he's going to be Dalton Connect, but if they choose to make him the center forward of that offense, I think he can grow into that role. I think he's that good.
Well, I'll tell you who won't be the Dalton Connect for them is Igor Militic coming over from Charlotte, but he will be a glue guy. He will be a perimeter beast. A paint beast.
Key defender.
He'll be a paint beast. Yeah, key defender. He's a 6'10 forward who can dribble a little bit. Looks like Porzingis out there, kind of. He can shoot a little bit from three. He can play in the paint. He's talented. Don't get me wrong. I think he's only played basketball for a couple of years. I remember watching him at Charlotte with Ali Khalifa when that kid was raw and only a freshman, and he impressed me. So as that kid continues to get reps and get some really good coaching from Rick Barnes, he could end up being a stud down low in the paint or even on the wings. I like Igor, all jokes aside, but I think it comes down to Zakai Ziegler for Tennessee, personally. Let's see how healthy he is. Let's see how quick he is.
I'm in on that.
I've got a conference winner that people really haven't been talking about, and I don't really understand why. Auburn. Why does nobody want Auburn again? Nobody ever wants Auburn. Maybe it's because they never win. That's probably what it is, to be honest with you. But I want Auburn. I do. I'll tell you a couple reasons why I want Auburn. Bruce Pearl is him. I still believe. He might not be the best X's and O's guy, but he's a motivator. And sometimes during a game when the lights are bright and it's a close game, that's a guy you want. You don't want the guy making the right play call on the fucking clipboard all the time. You want a guy who can look his player in the eyes and say, go in there and make this fucking shot. You're him. I still believe in Bruce Pearl. I still believe in Auburn. I do. Look at some of the pieces coming in, and people are worried. They're saying, oh, this team's not going to have enough offense. Again, they're only going to be able to rely on their defense. Typical Auburn. Typical comments, people talking about Auburn not actually knowing ball. We know Auburn relies on their defense, okay? We know when you play in the jungle, it's hard to beat them. They rely on that defense. They beat you down. They're physical. That's not going to change. But what will is some of these pieces they brought in that could score the fucking basketball. But let's start with some of the guys they already have, okay? Janai Broome. Janai Broome low-key fell off last year. I'm just going to say it. He was hurt. There was some weird off-the-field stuff going on, some rumors, injury stuff. I don't know what's true. I don't know what happened. I don't care. Clean slate. Janai Broome. Enter this season. Be the guy. Be the guy from 2 years ago. Hit the reset button. Hit the reset button, Janai Broome. I still believe in you. And they got Dylan Cardwell as well. Two good bigs for Auburn. Two guys who know the system. Two guys who there's no excuses to make mistakes. You don't have to drop 30 points a game, but do your job down low, and your team's more than likely going to win. Okay. You got Chad Baker Mazzara coming in as well. This kid's a stud. And then they add JP Peggs, who is known in the basketball community as one of the clutchest shooters in college basketball in the country. Look at what he's done in years past. This kid comes over from Furman. All he's been doing is hitting game winners for Furman over the last 3 years. He's the clutchest three-point shooter in college basketball. And they're going to need that. A game or two. I'm telling you right now, JP Peggs, remember the name. They also add Miles Kelly coming over from Georgia Tech. He could do it all. A do-it-all guard that could rebound. He can get in the paint if need be, but obviously a stud guard. Yeah. They've got bodies. I love what Bruce Pearl brought in this year. And I'm loving the Tigers. I'll take them to win the SEC.
Yeah, I think it'll be a fun team now that Denver Jones and Chad Baker Mazzara got their year with Auburn, and now they get to take bigger roles in the same offense. It'll be fun. I'm kind of excited too because Miles Kelly, frustrating guy, I don't know, to bet on and just watch at times because he had his games where he was absolutely unreal at Georgia Tech, and he had some games where he either disappeared or shot tornadoes or just looked like he was so out of sorts. Him and Kawasi Reeves, I don't think ever really worked in the backcourt. I assume that he's going to play a little more off the ball at Auburn, which I think could be good for him. So he at least has somebody to take the pressure off of him shooting wise there. And especially when you have an anchor in the paint in Janai Broome or Dylan Cardwell at any point, I feel like this could be a big time for him because they really haven't had a true like knockdown type shooter. I feel like in the past couple of years, because Katie Johnson, respectfully, is not that, and I feel like he's had to fill that role while he's been there, and now he's obviously gone, which is pretty tough on the defensive end, but offensively, I think they kind of needed it to grow. So I'm in on Auburn for sure.
Dude, I'm really liking Auburn. I'm liking Bruce Pearl, and I'm liking the pieces he brought in. Don't let JP Peggs get hot. It might be too late.
Yeah, he's good.
Furman, sharpshooter, is going to be a difference maker for them. You're going to see him hit at least one game winner for Auburn, maybe two. Maybe two. All right. Awesome. Great talking about the SEC there. Let's move on to the purest of conferences, Jovan. Let's talk about the Big East. Okay, let's finish strong here. Let's talk about the purest of conferences, the Big East. And we all know the Big East basketball is elite. We'll save the best for last year. but kind of a down year overall for the Big East, not for all the teams, but for the majority of the teams in the Big East. Only 3 made March Madness. That's rare. Typically, you see way more action from the Big East in March Madness. Kind of a down year. Some are calling it. So they've got some work to do. Obviously, UConn expected to repeat once again. But the real question is, do any of these other gritty programs have a chance to make a run at a Big East title, Jovan? We'll start with you. Who's your sleeper in the Big East for this upcoming season?
I'm going to go with Villanova, who were extremely disappointing last year in a million different ways, a million different spots. They were always sharp to be, I don't know, getting that bounce back game, and it seemed like it never really came. But now they bring in a lot of new faces, which, again, that's not a team that I would usually love to back, especially one that's, I don't know, dealing with a kind of a weird transition period that Villanova is. But I like their team. And the one guy that you can always lean back on that's still there is Eric Dixon, who is a matchup problem for really anybody. So, I mean, I think he's a great ad there, or a good guy to have there. And the great ad comes from a guy like Wooga Poplar, who kind of sucked that I think we didn't get to see him fully healthy for Miami last year, because it seemed like he was, granted, the whole team was hurt. I was excited to see him in certain spots where he was kind of getting the keys to that offense, because I feel like it would have been pretty fun and cool to see him take that role. Didn't get get that too much because he was also hurt. Hopefully he gets a fully healthy season. I think he can be a problem. Guys like Jameer Brickus coming over, Enoch Boakaye too. Like, there's a talented team. So, like, if there's any team in the Big East, because there are a lot of these middling teams that we expected them to bounce back all throughout the year, we never really got there. If there's a team I'm going to take to do that, it's going to be Villanova.
I don't know if Villanova can count as a sleeper, but maybe with how bad they played last year, you get a pass here. Still Villanova's.
They're not
based on the odds. They're
not
a
often a sleeper. Yeah, I mean, they're 6th in odds to win the conference. I think
it's just weird hearing Villanova be a sleeper after what they've done in our lifetime.
Yeah,
you know? It's sad.
Yeah, we're not used to it. Not used to it.
But after what they did last year, I mean, that product was a joke. Hit the reset button, bounce back. You got some NIL. You got some pieces still that are good. You're supposed to have a good coach. I don't know if I'm bought in there yet. That might be a handout job. I just don't see it, but I like a couple of the pieces that are still there. I do. And I don't like the Big East overall this season a ton.
Yeah.
I'm not that high on the Big East this season, so somebody's got to step up and do it. I mean, you're about to hear the sleeper I'm going to give, and you're going to think I'm crazy. That's because I couldn't pick anyone else. It's UConn in this conference, and that's it this season. But I'll give you my sleeper here. All right, I respect you for that Villanova take. Maybe they bounce back. Would love to see it. Would be good for the sport, right? My sleeper. This is a little crazy one, but I've seen it before. Maybe it happens again. How about Georgetown?
Whoa.
How about Georgetown? What's the one time Georgetown's done anything in recent years? It's when they came out of fucking nowhere and won the Big East title. Maybe they do it again. Who knows? Kind of a similar angle here. They've got a couple guys remaining on this roster that have some talent, right? They have some bodies. They brought in a couple good transfers as well. And they have a legendary coach, a big name coach. Now people are starting to ask questions about coach. They're starting to ask questions about Ed Cooley. They're saying, hey, maybe you only came down here because you cheated on your wife and you're getting away. And she said, you can either quit your job or you can come down to DC and we could start fresh. Not me saying it, just rumors. Maybe people are saying, you know, you kind of got pushed out there because you weren't the coach anyways. There's a lot of people talking right now and a lot of people calling for Ed Cooley's legacy saying he's not the guy. Well, I'm not saying he's Coach K, and I'm also not here saying he's a good dude, okay? But what I am saying is you roast that guy for a year and a half straight. You give him an off season. You add a couple of these pieces that I really do like that I'm going to talk about here in a moment. And I wouldn't want to bet on this Georgetown team. I wouldn't want to bet against this Georgetown team. And I wouldn't want to bet against Ed Cooley. I'll tell you that much. Look at some of the pieces they've got. Jaden Epps. I mean, there's a chance that guy leads the fucking conference in scoring legitimately. Maybe that's a little bit because they don't have that many other guys, right? Yeah. But he's also a legitimate scorer, Jaden Epps. Okay? Don't let him get hot. It might be too late. They add 2 more pieces that I'm extremely interested in. One of them you're going to know. One of them you definitely have heard of. We'll start with him and Malik Mack, the Harvard transfer. Yeah. One of the most coveted transfers. Yes. One of the most coveted transfers in the entire portal. Nobody cares about. Nobody's talking about. He's at Georgetown. He is going to shine on a team that needs guys to put shots up. Plain and simple. It can't just all be Epps. And then you look at maybe the most intriguing piece added to this team in the offseason, And that's Jovan's guy from TCU, Micah Peavy, who I think could be a great player in this offense, who I'm hearing is going to run the points, which I love. Let's try something different with Micah Peavy. The guy shouldn't be a fuck. Yeah, he's going to run the points. You know what?
I don't want. Like.
You know what? I'll tell you why I like it, because he'll be shooting less. Run the fucking offense. Stop shooting the ball. You stink at shooting. Respectfully, Micah Peavy. You're really athletic. You could dribble. You can move. You could play defense a little bit when you want to. Stop shooting so much. Run the floor. Let the other two guys, Malik Mack and Jaden Epps, who are two professional bucket getters, let those guys score. Let those guys shoot. Be a floor general, Micah Peavy. Be the guy. Jovan, I'm telling you, man, this Georgetown team, they could go 0 for this year, or they could win this fucking Big East Conference championship. I would not be shocked either way. Very similar to the identity of this team from years past that we've seen be very similar to that, where they either go 0 for in the conference, and then they go and win the fucking Big East tournament. I could see it again this year. I could see craziness. I could see Ed Cooley standing on business, putting his middle fingers up and saying, I am him. I am him. He's running out of time. I'll back a motivated coach down here with plenty of NIL money and 2 really good transfers, in my opinion. I will.
Yeah.
I will. We'll see how it goes. Again, guys, that's a sleeper, and that's Georgetown, who's plus $1 million to win the Big East. So if they end up sucking, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. That is a dart throw in a conference where I don't like a lot of teams. Okay. Now let's focus in. Let's reel it in here, Giovanni. Let's talk about some frauds. Let's roast some teams. Who's the squad in the Big East? Because again, like I just said, I'm not liking the Big East this year. I'm not digging it. Who's a team that you're hating right now in the Big East, Giovanni? Who's the team you're low on?
Creighton. Creighton. And it's one of the 3 ranked Big East teams, I believe, to start the season. I don't have them in front of me, but I assume it's Creighton, UConn. Maybe there isn't even a third. Marquette might be looming, or Seton Hall might be looming, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, Marquette. So 3, one of the 3. Which first, I mean, I mentioned it when we were talking about Texas Tech. I think it starts with Pop Isaacs, who is a volume guy that kind of throws off everything for an offense. And as much as I love to bet on him because I know he's going to take the shots, I know the volume is going to be there 99 times out of 100. Shot selection is not great. The IQ is not great. He also can't defend, which is a problem. And he really can't play off the ball either, because I would only assume that Stephen Ashworth, who I don't even know how he's still in college, is
makes no sense.
Gonna have the ball in his hands the majority of the time. They're gonna try to play Pop Isaacs like at the 2. Doesn't really work because he's not an off-ball player. They tried doing that at Texas Tech, and he legitimately said no. And he was bad when he was playing off the ball, and when they gave him the ball, he shot 20 shots and 15% from the field. He was bad. So like, as much as I kind of want to believe that Kalkbrenner should be the class of this conference as far as big men go, especially now that Klingon's in the NBA, after that, I just really can't get with this team. I feel like the whole backcourt chemistry is just never going to be there. That's kind of what I'm banking on for Creighton. So I feel like they're going to disappoint.
I mean, I'm in. Again, like, they're not going to be bad. They're not going to be terrible. They're not going to be one of the worst teams in the conference, but they could definitely be qualified as a fraud based on how much hype they're getting. 100%. What are you hearing about this conference preseason? You're hearing they have the best player returning in this conference, and Kalkbrenner. That should be enough. That should do it, right? And then I'm looking at this team, and I'm saying this didn't work last year, and they lost their best player, and now they're adding a guy in Pop Isaacs you just talked about who jacks shots and isn't a team guy. How is this going to make this Creighton team better? And I'll tell you what, Stephen Ashworth, bless his heart, that dude's not clutch at all.
No.
That dude's not clutch at all. Hasn't been. Would love to see him prove me wrong. I'm out on Creighton. I'm so with you. My fraud is Seton Hall. And this one's kind of messed up. I mean, Shaheen Holloway, he blessed us with one of the craziest, March Madness runs of all time with St. Peter's, bless his heart. And he still, I feel like, gets some leeway with that crazy run. People thinking he's a great coach. And look, maybe he is. But he's going to have to pull out some crazy tricks out of that bag to make this team good. And look, he's done it in the past. Okay, he's done more with what he's had since he was at St. Peter's. I mean, come on. That's the definition of doing more with what you have. Okay, so maybe he does it again. Maybe he proves me wrong. But looking at the odds, this team gets zero respect heading into this season. I have a pretty good inkling that the books are probably not wrong about the majority of things, and they're probably disrespecting them for a reason. And then I look at the roster of this team, man. I mean, they got Dylan Adewusu. That's great. The guy averaged 9 points a game last year, and he's the best returning player coming back. And I don't know anybody else who's on the squad, really, dudes. Kaderi Richmond's leaving. That's a huge loss. How are they going to replace that production? I don't know if they can. I'm out on Seton Hall. I think there's a reason why they're so low on all these, preseason rankings of the Big East, and I think it's because they don't have the guys. And we're going to learn a lot about Holloway. Maybe he is a magician. Maybe he is that good of a coach, and if he is, to be honest with you, probably should be coaching somewhere better than Seton Hall going forwards. But I just don't see it with this team and this roster, man. I just don't. I hope he proves me wrong. He's done it before.
That's fair.
Yep. Conference winners. I mean, come on. Do we even need to talk about conference winners in the Big East?
We don't.
Come on. The guy said, no, thank you, LeBron. I'm good. I'm going to go ahead and stay up here in Connecticut. It's freezing cold. I could come out to LA. I could be your coach. I could literally do nothing and work way less and work with LeBron and etch my name in history of the sport. Actually, I'm good. I'm going to stay at Connecticut. Do you hear how ridiculous that is? That is what's happening in front of our eyes. And I respect the fuck out of it. I do. Because that's what he wants. He wants to stay. And he wants to keep building this program that he's worked his butt off to get here. And he's not done. It's UConn. It's not a crazy take. They're the favorites. They're going to win this fucking conference again. They're dominant. Their team is stacked. From top to bottom, bench, starters, doesn't matter. This team is fucking good. Ada Mahaney coming in from St. Mary's could be the difference as well.
That's such a UConn get too. I feel like they're. We always saw the potential. I think there with him at St. Mary's, it was just kind of tough to. I don't know. He never really got the freedom to do what he wanted on offense at St. Mary's, and the offense was kind of bad anyway. He's going to turn into a monster, dude.
He's not even going to have to start, which is the craziest part.
That's the wildest part of it all.
It's probably going to be Diarra still starting, and then he's going to be the backup sixth man. We'll see where it goes. No pressure. I mean, dude, there's a reason why he stayed. It's because he's got an absolute. I mean, this UConn system is firing on all cylinders. It runs itself at this point. It's a fucking wagon. Why would he leave? You don't leave this. You don't leave greatness. You don't win something that actually wins. They win, and they win again this year. It's UConn. It's not going to be close. The rest of this conference, unfortunately, I don't think the Big East is going to get better. Not saying they're only going to have 3 teams go to March Madness for the first time in conference history like it was last year, where it was like tied for the worst in the conference's history. Not saying it's going to be that bad, but it's not going to be much better. It's not going to be much better. Hope I'm wrong. This conference is elite. Talk about, I know we joke about, rivals and teams and players hating each other or whatever. Talk about fan bases and schools that fucking hate each other's guts, the Big East. And I respect it, and I love it.
Yeah. It's
great basketball. It's pure. But I don't think the teams are getting better. I think it's kind of like the ACC right now. I don't think the teams are getting better. Big names. The results aren't getting better, although for one team it is. UConn, they're a fucking wagon, and nothing is changing this year about that. That's for sure. Nothing. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, no hot takes there for the Big East. For the conference winners, we're taking the Huskies. Shocker. Before we close this puppy out, Jovan, I do want to ask you one more question. It's an important one. You ready?
Ready.
Who's winning the Natty this year?
I do think we finally see it this year. The year that the Cougs break through. You give me Houston to take it home.
No way.
I want to see a healthy season because with this roster and a healthy season, I thought they had the potential to do it last year. Injuries fucked it up. And I'm mad they didn't get a full run with Jamal Shedd too. This roster is still damn good. I like them to win the Big 12. I think even if they get punched in the mouth late in the regular season, and that's not a possibility, maybe it ends up being a good thing for their run going into March Madness because they might need that at some point. But I feel like the fact that they open the Big 12 play with a couple weaker opponents, that gets time for the offense to get flowing, like time for LJ Cryer to strap up, Emmanuel Sharp to do the same, Uzan to get comfortable. So I love it. as long as they can have a healthy season with all of their guys in the fold, put a ring on it, Kelvin Sampson.
Not a guy that deserves one more than Kelvin
really.
Sampson, probably. Great guy, great coach, great program. He deserves one. He deserves one. I'll talk about a guy who probably doesn't deserve one as much based off his actions, but a guy who I think could get one here, and that's Mark Few. That's Mark Few. Hard to say that with a straight face. Here's the deal with Gonzaga, okay, at plus 2,000. When are they going to do it? When are they going to break through and actually fucking do the damn thing? I mean, my goodness, how much more talent, how many more runs do they have to make, Jovan? It's got to be Gonzaga's year. At plus 2,000, I'll take a stab. Look, Mark Few, he got here in 2017. What happened? They were up at halftime and they blew it. They absolutely blew it to UNC, who crept back in that game, and they took it away from them. And then they got back there in 2021, a couple years later. What happened in that game? They got destroyed by Baylor. I guarantee you Mark Few probably hasn't slept the same since. Guaranteed. I mean, that one stings. He still wants his revenge. And this might be the best roster he's had in a while. Straight up. Look at the guys he's got. You got 81% of the minutes returning from last year. That's massive. You got Ryan Nembhard. You got Graham Ike. You got Khalif Battle coming in from Arkansas, who is not in that 81% of returning minutes, but he's the best player on that team, and he's one of the best players in the country. He's a future NBA guard. The guy can score anywhere. He could score on anyone. He could do anything. He's him. And I'm very excited to see him in this Mark Few offense, to be honest with you. He's going to be running the show. Khalif Battle is the guy. And I'm not even done yet. Michael Ajayi. This kid comes over from Pepperdine after 2 great seasons. He's going to provide some help for Graham Ike down low a little bit. He's not the biggest of guys, but he's got some size. He can help a little bit down low, and this team doesn't need that much help down low when you got a blue-collar guy like Greg, who's just foaming at the mouth, ready for his chance, Jovan, and this is going to be Greg's year. What do we know about Greg? He might not be able to make a jumper, okay? He might not be able to, make a mid-range or put on a crazy move on offense. But what does Greg do? That's the last guy that you want to fucking play basketball against. That guy's a maniac. Next thing you know, you're running down the court playing against them. You're catching a fucking elbow to the temple. Knocked out. You never know what's happening when you're playing against Greg. He's physical. He's tough. Some might say a little too tough at times, but that could be the edge that Gonzaga needs this season. He's the guy on that team it zags when everybody's zigging. You got a team of guys like Graham Ike, who might not be the toughest, but then you got Greg out there to be a fucking bully, to be a dickhead. And that could be the difference out there on the court this season. In Greg, I believe his junior season, he might still have one more year, but it's either his junior or senior year. The guy's been around for a while. It's his time. Greg, take over the paint. Be a fucking beast. Because you got some stud guards you can dish the rock to. Guys like Khalif Battle. Guys like Ryan Nembhard. Who can win you a fucking championship? For me, it's the Zags this year. I believe in Mark Few. I believe in Khalif Battle. And I believe in Gonzaga at plus 2,000.
Yeah, I'm in. I wish Steel Benners didn't get hurt. That would have been great to have him on the team.
That hurts. Yeah. All right. You're going Houston at plus 1,500, and I'll take the Zags at plus 2,000. Well, W-Pod came in just short under 2 hours. Hope you guys enjoyed listening. Jovan, I surely enjoyed talking with you about CBB. We're only a couple days away. I'm stoked. Let's have an absolute year. Let's kill it. Let's hit some bets. If anybody listening enjoyed this podcast, please drop a follow. Please drop a like on YouTube. Let me know in the comments on YouTube who you got winning the Natty. Let me know. I'm going to go through those comments and see who's sharp and who's not. Okay, we appreciate you guys listening. Again, if you like this content, check us out on YouTube at Bookit Sports. We got live shows on all day, every day. We're sweating out bets at night on Night Sweats. Check us out on YouTube at Bookit Sports. We appreciate you guys listening. We'll catch you on Monday for opening night. We'll be.
Okay.